What is the most pain you have ever experienced? A cluster headache. It's sort of like a big migraine made of lots of other big migraines working together as an elite unit to infiltrate every pain receptor you have. You've got that right. I had migraines since I was very young, but I got my first cluster headache when I was 17. I thought that it was just a terrible migraine at first. I took my meds and tried to sleep it off. But my mum came to check on me, and when she tried to sit me up in bed because I wasn't responsive, she said my eyes rolled back in my head. I literally fainted from the pain. She rushed me to the ER, and they immediately sent me in for a CAT scan because they thought I could have a brain aneurysm or maybe a tumor. Nope, just a cluster headache. They put me on a whole bunch of substances, and I ended up sleeping for about 20 hours. I'm glad they did because I wanted to die. The pain was so bad. I've had a few cluster headaches since then, but nothing in my life has ever come close to the agony from that first one. You never forget your first time. A warning that this is fairly graphic. The first number 2 after I gave birth to my child. I had stitches and, very unfortunately, hemorrhoids from pushing out my child. They also put you on iron, which makes your turds literally hard like bricks. It was like being ripped apart and giving birth all over again. I was sweating, praying, and almost on the verge of tears. Well, mine was a skinned knee, by which I mean all of the skin, and an infection. Infection under the kneecap, skin healed through the bandage, then they ripped the bandage off. Oh. I didn't find out that I was allergic to common dental anesthetics until I was 16. I'd just assumed that when they injected it and my face felt like it was on fire, that it was a way to distract me from the pain of having fillings and extractions done. It wasn't until I started discussing my anxiety with a new dentist that I actually found out you're supposed to feel numb, puffy, and free of major pain. You see, I've heard of people who go their entire lives not realizing they're allergic to this or that food and just thinking that things like peanuts are spicy and make you ill if you eat too much of them. But never have I heard of a similar phenomenon with painkillers being injected by medical personnel who are most likely better trained than anyone else to be able to recognize your abnormal reactions. I'm glad you eventually got someone who realized. I've been pretty lucky as far as physical pain goes. I once got an infection in my gums that made it painful to breathe, let alone speaking and eating, but that's been the worst. However, the time leading up to my divorce was traumatic. There's a psychosomatic sensation that comes along with it that starts in your sternum and radiates out to your fingertips. It makes the hair on your skin stand on end, and it feels like the bones in your arms are being split apart. It's impossible to think about anything other than your life falling apart, and all you want to do is curl up into a ball. I experienced this every day for months as I was driving home from work. Every day I'd get in my car and have an ugly, ugly cry, and feel like an alien chestburster was going to come out of me at any moment. I never want to feel like that again. I'm terrified of ever feeling like that again. When I got bitten by a rabid dog, went straight to the hospital. What they have to do is scrub the crap out of any wounds and then inject into them. Every little scratch. My hand was torn to crap and covered in bite marks. They injected so much liquid into my hand and fingers that they swelled up to about 3 times the size. Kidney stone. I had no idea what was happening, but it was clearly very, very wrong. The doctor sent me for prescription-only painkillers, and I had to lie on a bench outside the chemist, waiting for them to kick in before I could move enough to go to the hospital for an X-ray. Welding out on site, and it started to rain really heavy. Next thing you know, the arc from the welder decides to earth through your body and electrocutes you and blasts you off your feet. It feels like you've been kicked very hard in the head and your joints feel like they're on fire. A cyst ripped my left fallopian tube and left ovary off my uterus. 9 hours of ineffective morphine drip in the ER, and then 4 hours of surgery later, laparoscopy and C-section, they'd removed a 6.3-inch cyst that surrounded and destroyed my ovary. In short, lost an ovary, half as likely to get pregnant. Score! Gallstones. Imagine a fiery hand reaching into your insides and squeezing as hard as it could. Gout. Fricking crucial pain in the big toe joint, to the extent that even looking at it hurts like a witch. Lying in bed and the sheet grazes it, through the roof. Have you ever slipped on a wet tile and landed so hard that your coccyx, which is meant to curve inwards, actually bent out? I have. My vision went cloudy, I felt a flush of cold and could barely stand. For an 11-year-old, that's some serious crap. Trigeminal neuralgia. I've had it for 2 years now, and you never get used to that pain. There's a reason it was known as the self-deletion disease for a while. Dental abscess. I wouldn't wish it on my worst enemy. Look after your teeth, viewers. Now, hear me out, but period pains. And seriously talking, I don't or barely have them, but there was one time. One morning, I was preparing to go to college to do an exam when I felt it, like someone punched and stabbed me in the stomach repeatedly, with the stabs being slow as F. My legs couldn't carry me anymore, so I collapsed on the floor, dragged myself to the couch, and sat there, rocking back and forth while trying to give my stomach a massage. It lasted like 15 minutes, but holy frickin' crap, I got up from there shaking and terrified. I felt other types of pain before and after, but that one just got stuck in my brain. The worst part is I know some women actually have these every month. I wouldn't be able to have them. Like I would legit want you to take my insides out as long as I won't have them ever again. A month ago, I had the flu, a sinus infection, and then a nasty cold. Then I had to fly as soon as I felt better. Getting up to altitude, my ears started hurting, like a whole ton. I was almost ready to scream and beg them to turn the plane around. Then they popped, and I was fine. Then it happened the next day on the next flight as well. It was horrible. Tooth pain, and to qualify my comments, I was once in a car accident and broke every bone below my waist and both arms. The tooth pain hurt more. Seriously, if there's something wrong with your teeth, get it fixed before it starts hurting. Not so much physical pain, but my best friend, the only person I've ever been so close to, was hit and had their life taken by a drunk driver going the wrong way on the freeway. Don't drink and drive, people. I had the right half of my skull removed and stored in a freezer for a few months after I was hit by a drunk driver. If I ever bent forward too far, I'd experience the most painful headache. They'd last hours. I can't remember the substance I was prescribed, it was Bitrupitol or something. It was my savior. The medicine would knock me out. I vividly remember collapsing in bed and praying for the meds to bring unconsciousness. Nothing has ever come close to matching those headaches, and I doubt anything ever will. I never had them again after they nailed my skull back into place. I guess I'm lucky. I hear some people continue to get pain for a while after. Compartment syndrome is pretty high on the list as well. One time, I was like 7, I was calling my dog to come inside because we had to go pick up my older brother from soccer practice. I got a treat and started calling her name. After calling her name a few times, I turned in the other direction, and there she was, running and jumping up on me. Her front paws hit my shoulders and I fell backwards onto the cement. The back of my head smacked the ground so hard all I could do was scream. My mum ran out to me and brought me inside and put a pack of ice where I fell. After that, I figured that I had a concussion and a skull fracture, which would explain the massive headache I had the week after the initial impact. It's been 10 years and the pain of that impact has never been beaten by any other pain I've endured. In short, a dog jumped on me, I fell backwards onto cement, got a concussion and fractured my skull. Lots o' pain. Wait, why did your mum put a pack of ice on the ground where you fell? I'm kidding, but the way you wrote that did give me a few seconds pause. I hope there was at least one doctor's visit after this event, but then again, maybe your mum just took a patch of concrete to the doctor as well. Ingrown toenails. After college, I got a gig as a projectionist. Lots of bending and squatting, which I wasn't used to, but acclimated quickly. Except for my big toe. It decided to ingrow. I suppose from all the weird, new sustained stresses it was under. Maybe shoe choice didn't help? Regardless, it sucked. There was actually a slow churn of pus that would work its way out between the nail and flesh it was slowly stabbing into. I went to the doctor and he literally described the procedure to correct as torture. Plus, my insurance was, at the time, a little flaccid. Hanging out with the significant other one night and she asks me to get something off the side of the bed. I reach over, come around, and her foot is also coming around and her foot beautifully connects with the toe. And my vision explodes. It was like a momentary, all-encompassing starburst of light. I think I passed out for a split second, but I'm back in time to see a glob of pus sailing through the air and onto parts unknown. She doesn't even react or isn't even looking at me. It's fine. Most painfully single moment of my life, no big. But she did something. Magical, healing 5 key points kick. It was like the toe was convinced that it needed to get its crap together, and it did. Slow recovery eventually became full recovery. No doctor torture required. I married that girl. The toe thing was admittedly unrelated in that particular decision, but it seemed like an appropriate end to the story. Shingles in my face. I'd rather give birth 3 times over than to experience that nerve pain ever again. Tooth pain because of pressure changes during a transatlantic flight. I thought my teeth would implode. Inner bleeding in my calf. I don't know what it was. I injured myself during MMA training, I guess, but I was fine for several hours and had no pain. Then I noticed after several more hours that I can't really set one of my feet on the ground without pain. I didn't think too much about it. I thought some insect might have bit me or something, and I went to bed. I couldn't sleep since I was in too much pain, but I thought I would fall asleep at some point and it might be gone the next day. Then at some point I felt like rather dropping dead than enduring this pain and decided to go to the hospital. I couldn't place my foot on the ground and was jumping on the healthy foot to move forward. I was surprised how much harder that was than when you try it with 2 healthy feet. When I got to the emergency room, there was no one else and I waited for another hour until it was my turn. It was close to the point where they would have had to cut my calf open to release the blood. Honestly, the most physical pain that I've had to endure so far. My eardrum burst because of an ear infection. Hours of writhing and then sweet relief. The sweet relief came with a lifetime of hearing loss though, so I wouldn't recommend it. Might be a little bit cliche, but a kick in the nads hurt like a motherfricker. To the point where you can't move and start sobbing like a baby. Getting kicked in the nads isn't sore instantly. It's about a minute after getting kicked in them that's sore as hell. Makes you want to throw up in pain. Just reading this and I feel pain in mine. I remember one time when my friend chest passed a basketball at point blank into my gonads. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out Easy Mode, also linked below, and subscribe. Circumcision as an adult. Hands down the worst pain I've ever encountered. I've had my face broken in 3 places and had surgery, and that wasn't even close to the pain of about 20 stitches in my danger zone. Indeed, I've had it done too. 3 days later, I woke up with a huge morning surprise. 2 stitches ended up popping off. That wasn't too pleasant. And yes, huge may be an exaggeration. Waking up during surgery to repair a shattered shoulder. I woke up to a guy putting a screw in my bones. Motherfricker, stop that! Oh, I thought you were out. I'm not, you freaking son of a witch! Stop that! I proceeded to use up every curse word I knew in about 5 languages. And then I was out. A couple of weeks later, I was in for a follow-up. And I looked the guy up and apologized for the nasty stuff I said. He laughed and said it was okay. And then he said, "So, you said something I think in Russian, what does it mean?" I told him that he really didn't want to know. Easy answer. Childbirth by a mile. I've broken many bones, undergone many surgeries, and suffered many kinds of injuries, but childbirth takes the trophy as the most painful of all of them. The only way I can describe it is, imagine having your hips cranked apart slowly with a vice, and no break from the pain once the contractions are coming sharp and fast. After 16 hours of trying to be a hard woman, I opted for epidural, so I can only imagine what extra pain the pushing and crowning would have added. Anyone who says it's not that bad is bullcrapping you. Sciatica. I was pushing cars, stuck in a blizzard one day, and during a push, I felt something go in my back. Kept going and helped because how could I not when someone in front of me is stuck? So by the end of the day, I was hurt. 2 days later, I was in pain and drove myself to the non-emergency at the hospital at 3 a.m. while crying because I couldn't stop the pain shooting down my lower back and leg. It felt like someone had kicked me as hard as they could in my thigh and calf. Except the pain didn't lessen, it just stayed. If I moved or stretched, it was like being stabbed in the nerves. I ended up slipping a disc which pinched the nerves going down my leg. Sciatica sucks. I was run over by a car as a pedestrian. That day, I thought I was totally fine. I was taken to the ER, and the extent of the damage was a minor concussion. I woke up the next morning and holy frick, I felt like I'd been run over by a car. The narrator was hit by a car once and also felt completely fine, only to realize that he had grazes all over the place some minutes later. Maybe it was shock for me and more likely concussion for you. Nothing beats trigeminal neuralgia. Sorry, I've got my sympathy for sufferers of other conditions, but there simply aren't words to describe how much pain this illness causes. I'm an 8-year sufferer, which is nice since a lot of people just think screw it and decide not to be alive anymore after a while. And the number of people who know what it is negligible. I had 2 perfectly normal teeth extracted and a 3-hour root canal surgery on another before the doctors came even close to working out where the pain was coming from. This is gonna sound cheesy as heck, but screw it. Heartbreak. The pain is nauseating. No, I've heard about that too. I remember my friend telling me about how one of his best friends had been dumped after a 5-year relationship and couldn't breathe and her chest hurt really badly. Kidney stone. I'd taken the day off because I thought I had back pain, and by the evening I was curled up in a ball on the bathroom floor, howling. Just howling like an animal. I had to have my middle fingernail removed on my right hand. Somehow it got infected and swelled up massively, and there was a huge amount of pus underneath the nail itself. The doctor injected local anesthetic in 2 spots just above where the nail starts, but I could still feel the scalpel, so I was given 2 more injections, but could still feel everything. It turns out local anesthetic doesn't work on me. The painful bit was when the doctor had a pair of pliers in one hand, tugging and twisting the end of my nail, and the other hand held a scalpel that was slicing the skin between my finger and the underside of my nail, slicing all the way under the nail to the end of it. Oof. My first baby was 36 hours of labor with an epidural at hour 28, with the contractions less than 3 minutes apart the whole time. It got to the point where I was having double contractions, where a second contraction would start just as the first ended. I was in so much pain I blew chunks, passed out numerous times only to be brought back by another contraction, and was hallucinating. The second baby was a planned C-section. I got a minivan's sliding door shut on my finger, shattered the distal and intermediate phalange of my right index finger, got 26 stitches, lost my fingernail, it grew back, and suffered permanent nerve damage. It's numb most of the time now. So definitely not as bad as most, but it did still hurt like a motherfricker. First, waking up after my scoliosis surgery. That sucked. Ahoy, fellow crooked friend. I had 10 vertebrae fused 8 years ago myself. To be honest, the pain from surgery itself wasn't so bad, but waking up with a breathing tube down your throat, feeling like you're choking, but they can't take the tube out until you breathe on your own. That was the worst of it for me. The surgery has made life 50 times better for me, though. Mild and moderate pain nearly constantly, but no worse than it was before surgery, and now no back brace. I'm glad to hear that you're all shipshape now. Well, once I had a dry socket. That hurt quite a bit. Pain radiating through my jaw and into my skull. I'd set that at a 3. Sometimes I get these horrible, horrible calf cramps. The upper part of the calf muscle, where most of its bulk is at, will start to slowly feel like it's forming some kind of fist in there. The anticipation is awful. Sometimes I can stave it off by either stretching the muscle or suddenly sinking my fingers deep, deep into it, but that usually just delays matters. And then I'm stuck, curled up, trying to do everything, anything to avoid flexing or moving that muscle. Just waiting it out, gritting my teeth, tears at the edge of my eyes, hoping the pain will go away soon. That's a 5, maybe a 6. My lower back aches most of the time. It's a lower level pain, a 1 on the scale just to indicate that I know that yes, it's definitely pain. My existence is this, hovering at a 1, sometimes drifting up to a 2. I can still feel the fibers on either side of my lower spinal column even now. But sometimes with no trigger or warning other than movement, it seems like every muscle in my lower back decides it's time to pull and pull for all they're worth. I don't think that's actually what's happening, but it's hard to tell because what I get is a brief moment of noticing my spine muscles feel tighter than usual. Only just a moment, though. And after that, my existence is pain. I don't cry and I don't even cry out. That would require too much mental bandwidth. That would require me to still be in control. I'm really not, though. Animal instinct has taken over, and it has one goal, and that goal is to escape the pain. I gasp like a fish. I'm aware, but all I can do is try and bounce myself to a position where the pain is less, to try and find a position in which I'll be allowed to talk. If there's anybody nearby, I try to let them know that I'm probably physically fine and to let it pass. I say this now because the doctors can never find anything wrong with me, and they've looked. What used to be a trip to the ER is now just me trying to wait it out and maybe, if I can, take a mega dose of an anti-inflammatory. Ibuprofen is my go-to, because frankly that's all the hospital will do for me. I stay in this state for maybe about an hour. I think the most time I've ever been in this state is 3. Then it fades and my lower spine floats at a 3 to 4 for a week or 4, and then it's back to its usual 1 or 2 on the pain scale. But that initial pain? That's what I'd call a 10. Since I was 10 years old, I've been getting this upper abdominal pain. Attacks usually last more than 5 days, nothing takes the pain away, not even a little bit. I've been to countless doctors, emergency trips, and countless tests, but still cannot be diagnosed with anything. I've been given prescription painkillers that don't take the pain away, even. It's by far the worst pain. It gets so bad I end up curled up in a ball crying, and considering seriously jabbing sharp objects right into where the pain is located. I get so sleep-deprived. I've given birth twice, once without an epidural. This abdominal pain I get is way worse. Birth really wasn't that painful for me in comparison, just like really bad period cramps. The second worst pain I felt would be symphysis pubis dysfunction during my second pregnancy. I'd literally be paralyzed with pain if I dared lie down. I saw a chiropractor who worked absolute magic, and the pain was gone with regular pelvic adjustments until I gave birth. In 10th grade, I went to the eye doctor because I was having allergy problems in my eyes. I have good vision, so I've never really been to an eye doctor before, nor had my eyes dilated. He dilated them for one last check for symptoms. Turns out I was allergic to the eye drops. When I stood up to walk out to the lobby, I passed out and fell flat on my face/chin on the thin doctor's office carpet. I'm 6'3". It completely shattered my jaw, knocked my front tooth out, and bit off the top of my tongue. Ambulance, multiple doctors, hundreds of stitches, horrible concussions, so I don't remember any of it. It happened in the beginning of May, and I couldn't chew anything until July. It hurt. In short, shattered my jaw and bit the tip off my tongue at the eye doctor. What's the worst case of psycho overprotective parenting that you've ever seen? When I was doing freshman orientation years ago at college, the tour guide told a story when we got to the dorms. The head RA for a freshman dorm got a knock on her office door about 2-ish months into the first semester, right before midterms. A girl walked in and asked what was the longest amount of time guests were allowed to stay in the room. The RA told her, can't remember the amount of days, and the girl says that her roommate's mother has been living in the room since the move-in weekend. Holy frick, no. I went to a high school with a guy whose parents had a camera installed in his room that fed into a TV screen in their bedroom. When he told me, I assumed it was one of those things they used when he was a baby, then disabled when he was older. Nope, according to him, they still kept it on 24/7, even though he was like 17 years old. I've never been so creeped out. Holy crap! I'd stare at the camera and pleasure myself furiously to assert dominance. Reddit has ruined me. My aunt won't let her kids open their own soda cans because she thinks they'll cut their fingers off, which was fine when they were young, but they're 15 and 18 now. When I attended private school, K-8, we weren't allowed to have soda cans. The reason was the principal had a student at her previous school get hit in the mouth with a kickball while drinking and sliced their lips. One freak, isolated accident, and no one's allowed soda cans. WTF. Sodas were allowed up until that witch came to school. It was a Catholic school, and that principal was your stereotypical nun who ran around the school with a bullhorn, yelling at students all day. A girl I know didn't get the talk from her parents until she was 18 or 19. Her mum had decided that if she didn't know what that was, she would keep her virginity forever or something like that. Now, Sally, this is what people do when they really love each other. Oh, Billy and I do that all the time. Girl at school wasn't allowed any sugar, no sweets, not even fruit. It was weird. I invited her to a party at mine, and her parents came round before the party to check our house was safe. They asked if our gate locked to keep people out. It wasn't fair on her, though. Every birthday or party, she'd eat tons of junk food and feel ill, and she used to crawl around the classroom pretending she was a cat. I think they broke her. Oof. I hope you recovered someday, young cat lady. I wonder if she was diabetic or something, or if the parents were just straight-up Fruit Loops. My wife's mother. Too many acts of lunacy to mention, but the one that sticks out was when we went to their house for the family barbecue. We were in our mid-20s. Mum decides to start a fight over my presence, as I wasn't family, and thus should not be attending. Wife says, "If he's not welcome, we're leaving." Mum says, "No, you're not. You're grounded." Wife just gives her this tilt-your-head sideways look and says, "We're going back to our house." I know someone who has just moved into her college dorm a couple of weeks ago. This girl has never had a house key as her mum wouldn't allow it. If she wanted in the house, mum better be there. Her parents also have all of her social media passwords, and her mum openly states she used to go and read the chat conversations. Not as bad as others, however the girl has already been home one weekend and is set to come back in a few weeks. We're all wondering how she'll rebel once she's under the college experience. This girl's brother, who's in middle school, maybe just starting high school, is worse. He is so coddled that he freaked out when he was left in a waiting room at a doctor's office alone, while his uncle went back for his appointment. The kid could not be left alone. For the record, neither kid is special needs. Around the middle of my first semester of college, I lost my phone. I noticed it was missing around when I got back to my dorm. Thinking that I left it in one of my classrooms, I called for it from a friend's phone. A classmate who lives off campus had found it. He took it home because he knew it was mine and was going to give it back next Monday during class, and that was that. I would get my phone on Monday, so problem solved. Boy, was I wrong. Because he turned off the phone after that call, my mother couldn't get a hold of me. My mum, being my mum, assumed I was dead in a smack house after doing too many substances. The lunatic took a plane and flew from Panama to DC just so she could check I was doing okay. Halfway across the continent just so she could ask one question. Keep in mind my best friend and 4 other high school friends were attending the same college as me and lived in the same dorm building as me, and she had all their phone numbers. Also, to make matters worse, this was not the last time she took an 8-hour flight just to make sure I was okay. My first roommate in college was extremely coddled by his mother, or at least I thought so. His home was about an hour away from campus, and she came up every day to get his laundry and make his bed, clean his side of the room. They were both neat freaks, and I wasn't a slob by any means, but I wasn't quite as neat as either of them would have liked. What ended up happening is I would come back from my class and find her making my bed, organizing my desk, and picking up my dirty clothes. Didn't really appreciate that, but I didn't want to make waves, so I just kept my mouth closed. Finally, it got really weird when I came back after a class had gotten cancelled and they were both in the same twin bed. He was sleeping and she was stroking his hair and face and singing him a lullaby. Wife grew up in a quiverful family. She was only allowed to wear ankle-length skirts, no movies at any time, only parental-approved books. Pilgrim's Progress, the Bible, theology books, no music except for classical and hymns. In order to date her, I had to court her. That involved never being alone, her parents inviting themselves to our anniversary dinners, siblings repeating every word that we said back to her parents. I gave her a goodbye hug and her mother yelled at her, calling her a whore and a loose woman. Finally, she gave up and ran away. They chased her to her car screaming and tried to block her in the driveway with a tractor. My first boyfriend in high school practically lived at our house because my mother refused to let me go to his. He was over every day after school and most weekends. Finally, I convinced her to let me drive myself to his house. At this point, I had met his dad twice, and his dad thought he did something to offend or scare me off because I never came to visit them. I really wanted to go out and hang out with him and his dad, so I drove myself to his house with the condition that I call my mother immediately upon arrival from their phone. Google Maps said it should take 8 minutes to get there. 8 minutes and 45 seconds later, I get an enraged phone call from my mum. I was just walking in the door and I hadn't called her yet. She made me immediately return home and grounded me from my cell phone for a month. The parents from these stories are the kind of people who go on murderous rampages when their children inevitably rebel, aren't they? I had an ex-boyfriend from high school whose parents were very strict about him dating. So we always had group dates, we weren't allowed to be alone, we went over to his house for a movie night and everyone all of a sudden left. But it was super late and my dad's place was across town, so I called for him to pick me up, but it was going to take 45 minutes to get there. His parents made me wait outside on the porch alone in November in Canada. It was cold. He wasn't allowed to wait outside with me. They didn't even let me wait in the foyer with them supervising. Well, girls who've frozen to death can't get pregnant, I guess. My mother signed me out of high school, and I was not allowed to go out of the house for almost 2 years. She quit her job and was convinced the Asian mafia was going to kill us. I wasn't allowed near windows, to get the mail, nothing. But my siblings came and went as they pleased. To this day, I do not understand. You are obviously the favorite. Congrats! I got one. My sister once told me about this one time when she was at a beach house with her friends. They were all over 20 years old and they were planning to stay there the weekend. Obviously, they were going to stay up all night watching movies when midnight strikes. This one girl's phone starts to ring and it was her mother telling her to go to sleep. Worst part? She silently stood up and went to bed. She's over 20 years old. I had a 9 p.m. bedtime at 17. I had to get up at 8 a.m. the next day. So for 11 hours a day, I was supposed to be in bed asleep. It drove me nuts. Getting up early was also a big no-no because I woke her up. I wasn't allowed to leave my room for anything either. It was hell. It took months of her screaming at me and me talking as calmly as I could while she hit, screamed, trashed my room and my schoolwork before she would let me stay up as long as I wanted. The school ended up getting involved because I went from an A student to a D in a matter of months because I just couldn't get all of my work done. I worked on the weekends and was training 4 nights a week as well. Made getting all my work done difficult when after school I was supposed to clean the house, eat dinner, then go straight to training. I work security at a college, so I've seen my fair share. This wasn't so much overprotective as it was babying. I once had a mother call our office. The exchange went as following. Mother: Hello? Can you please tell my son's professor that he won't be in class today? He doesn't feel well. Me: Where is your son? Oh, he's there, on campus in the dorms. Ma'am, I don't know who your son's professor is, and even if I did, it's his responsibility to get in touch with them, not mine or yours. Oh, I know, but he called me and asked me to call him out of class. He's in college now. He's 18, he can do this on his own. He doesn't even need to call, he emails his professor. Ha! Oh, you're so right. I had a friend growing up whose mum refused to send a Christmas card with her and her brother's photos on it. The mum was convinced at the end of the season, once people threw away the cards, the garbage man or anyone rifling through the trash would see her amazing, beautiful children, find the address on the discarded envelope, and come kidnap the kids from their home. She did many other bizarre things, but that one always stuck out to me. I frickin' hate when parents do this. It's extremely overprotective and kids need to be exposed to the world. Besides, I tend to return the kids when I'm done with them. Sincerely, the garbage man. In all seriousness, the level of paranoia to imagine that people are digging through your trash specifically to get the rare thrown-out photos of children who sent the card from a different house is an extreme level of delusion. On my friend's 13th birthday, his big brother was taking us paintballing. We said goodbye to his mum. She was, in full disclosure, a severe paranoid schizophrenic who liked to go off her meds. Anywho, we left the house and headed to paintball. At a random gas station a good half-hour away, we stop for snacks. When the older brother goes inside, the mum pulls up to a screeching halt next to us, rolls down the windows and starts yelling at us to make sure the older brother spends all the money on paintball, rocking the crazy eyes the whole time. She leaves by rolling around to the back of the gas station and idling there. When the older brother got back, we told him what was going on. He told us to buckle up. Sure enough, we pulled out of the gas station and she starts to try tailing us. I say try because next thing I know we're on the freeway doing at least 100, dodging from lane to lane till we found a quick off-ramp that took us under a bridge where we hid for a few minutes to make sure we'd lost her. The older brother refused to let her ruin my friend's 13th birthday. He was a good dude. There's 2 major things that we older brothers have to do. 1. Annoy your siblings. 2. Make sure no one else F's with your siblings. My ex's mum screamed in my face, legit inches away from my face, that I was stealing her son away when he bought his house. It was his decision to buy a house and he had wanted me to live with him. The location of the house, you ask? Directly across the street from where his parents live. Was his name Raymond, and did everybody love him? My former roommate's parents were extremely protective of them. Once I woke up to 3 calls and 4 texts from her mum asking if my roommate was in the room. I replied back, yes. Later that day, my roommate explained to me that there was a girl murdered in North Carolina that fit her description and her parents wanted to make sure she was alive. We go to school over 400 miles away from North Carolina. I don't know about the worst since my parents were pretty good about other stuff, but anything to do with adult fun times was a major no-go. I remember them trying to give the talk to my oldest sister, who was about 8 or 9 at the time, making me 4 or 5. We got to the part where the guy puts the thing he pees out of into a hole that I was not aware existed, and I ran away screaming. That subject was never revisited. They pulled me out of middle school adult education because it was too early and my high school taught abstinence. I thought that all adult flicks, not just those ones starring children, were illegal until college. My friend's mum. They're great people and I love them like a second family, but she was overprotective. 4th grade, his mum cut the tail off the Nightcrawler action figure I got him for his birthday for being demonic. 5th grade, she throws away the medieval Spawn action figure I got him for being Spawn. High school, she throws away the vintage Faster Pussycat shirt I gave him. His dad's cool though. He'd watch Beavis and Butthead with us when we were 10. I once dated a girl with absolutely insane parents. Throughout middle school and high school, they refused to let her go out to anything but school and choir trips. She had to argue and bargain with them for months just to be able to go to senior prom. They wouldn't let her go to junior prom. They also refused to let her get a driver's license or a car to limit her mobility. Even to this day, they refuse to let her go out. She, a 20-year-old woman, has to get permission from her super restrictive mum and dad to go out for coffee at the cafe downstairs. The worst part of it all is that she can't move out as they have hold of her passport and where she lives. It's more or less impossible to get anything done without it. On the legality of withholding her passport, I don't know for sure whether it is or not. The laws where I lived sometimes had really backwards policies. I've advised her to try to take action or escape many times, but for personal reasons, she's decided not to. I disagree entirely with her choice, but it's her choice to make, not mine. I graduated high school a year and a few months ago. A good friend of mine was a freshman in my senior year. Now she's a junior and taking college classes at my college. She's not allowed to talk to me because I graduated. She still does in person, but not as much as we used to be able to. There are a lot more stories of these sorts of relationships continuing into adulthood than I would have expected. How about you? When I was in college, I was dating a girl and had been for some time. My dad lived in another state and we had made plans to go visit him, so she could meet him for the first time. The day we were supposed to leave, like 2 hours before we left town, she got her grades from her college. They weren't as good as her parents wanted, so they grounded her. I went to her house to try and reason with her mum. I should have bailed at that red flag, but I was in love, and her mum was so condescending. I explained how my dad and stepmom had made arrangements for her to be there, and how excited they were to meet her. She wouldn't hear it. I made the mistake of saying, "I understand that you're upset, but deciding this right before the trip just seems childish." I was banned from their house. We were actually together for a really long time after that, but I know they're still really overprotective and she's really dependent on them. She's 31 and the last time I talked to her, a few months back, she still lived with them. My boss has a baby and a 4-year-old and they are super overprotective. Like the 4-year-old still sleeps in their bed with them and the baby, and they haven't left either kid alone with another person ever. Sometimes he talks about how they've never been out since the kids. Like I can relate. I have a pair myself, but we still live our lives. The 4-year-old went to preschool, so the mum went with him and sat in the class every day, and even sat at his table and played with him instead of letting him interact with his peers. One time they were in the office and my boss hand-fed him food because he didn't want the kid handling the food himself since the kid had recently touched their computer. Recently, he was describing their garden and how the food at the back never gets picked because we can't go back there ever because of the baby, you know? No, I have no idea. You lived on a small fenced lot in the suburbs. What are you afraid of getting to your baby if you walk out to the corner of your yard? The worst part is he's constantly telling me how tired he is and how his kids never sleep. But it's probably because they're all sleeping in the same bed, waking each other up all the time. Both my kids were in their own room by a couple of months old, and it made life so much easier. When they're in the room with you, you notice every little noise. I was TAing a general chemistry lab in college, and a parent emailed me after the first lab report with an annotated copy of the graded assignment I gave, which was a B+. Little Johnny had never gotten a B in class before, and I was being unfair since it was his first semester in college. Long story short, she threatened to go to the professor. I said go ahead, and they did. The professor was awesome. When kids whine and moan about their grades, he offers them a regrade, and then goes over the report with a fine-toothed comb. The B+ got changed to a C. The student was the one who ultimately asked for the regrade. Would he have asked for one if his parents didn't make a stink? Maybe, maybe not. It doesn't matter. Part of being in college is learning to take responsibility for your actions. And there's a reason professors rely on TAs for grading freshman lab assignments. Their time and attention is better spent elsewhere. Asking the professor for a personal regrade must carry downside risk. Otherwise, everyone would ask for one every time. Please feel free to question the grader on anything. That's part of their job too. Just make sure you have a solid case before requesting a formal regrade. A friend of mine had a very overprotective and religious set of parents. He didn't have a door on his bedroom or bathroom. When you went over there, you had to take your shoes and socks off. I understand shoes, but how are socks any more dirty than bare feet? He never got dropped anywhere either. Always had to be mum or dad there. I think the scariest part of that to me and some of the other commenters was the lack of a door on a bathroom. Seriously, WTF? Yes, I've been waiting for this. So I met my wife on OkCupid. We were about 21 at the time. I came into her life at a very bad moment. She was failing classes, anxiety-prone, etc. Eventually, she got asked to take a leave of absence from her school. Against my better advice, she didn't tell her parents. Went back to the school to pack up her stuff and figure out what her next move was. Well, her parents found out within that next day or so, and her dad flew some odd 1,000 miles to get her and go back home. But this was the next thing. They cut her off from the world. She couldn't go outside the house unless it was to the schools that they enrolled her in to get her back in good standing. She dropped off the face of the earth. Her mum spent time writing all of her friends, pretending to be her, stating that they could not be friends and that she was just moving on with her life. Her mum did the same to me. Eventually I got a hold of her and we had to talk secret for months on end. We started dating and she graduated and we kept talking. Well, she finally moves out of her parents' house and comes to visit me some 1,000 miles away. Her parents cut her cell phone off. When she gets back to her hometown, they demand she comes over. They confiscate some items of hers that I gave her and told her to never speak to me again. That doesn't work, of course. Eventually we say screw it because they're bat crap crazy. We're talking the mother mailing me that she knew who many managers were and she could call them and let them have some fricking craziness. And then we got married. When we finally told them, which is like a month or two after it happens, the mum played the victim like we didn't even get her the chance to get to know me and to like me. And I'm just like, B-word? You impersonated your daughter and told me that you wanted nothing to do with me. Your daughter told you that we would be together, and you threatened to disown her. As you could see, this completely works me up. Nonetheless, now the mother refuses to speak with either of us, has manipulated the ballless father into not speaking with his own child, and the teenaged younger sister thinks that my wife is the world's most awful person for choosing to live her life. For frick's sake. Educators, have you ever had a real genius in class? What made him or her so smart? When I was student teaching, I had a work-study gig at a wraparound program in my city. It was half tutoring, half daycare for students that needed a place to go between that time when school ended but before their parents got home. While it was mostly populated by middle and high school students, there were a handful of very young children as well, 5 to 6 years old. One very little girl, she couldn't have been older than 6, was probably 5, approached me with a box of chess. She didn't know how to play, but said her father played and she wanted to learn how. I'm not a chess expert, but I've played a good amount of times and read a few books, and I can beat my friends or a hard computer. To clarify that, I'm talking about the hard setting on my phone. It's about 1500 ELO. I'm somewhere above that, but probably not by much. I met with this little girl for about 30 minutes every day. In 2 days, she understood all the rules and could play competently. At the end of the week, she tied the game in a stalemate. At the end of the second week, I never won again. Turns out she was the daughter of a professor at my college, and he was an internationally ranked chess player. When I ran into him, he couldn't thank me enough for teaching his daughter chess, as his wife had issued a decree that he wasn't allowed to teach or play or mention chess around their daughter. Understandable, didn't want to pressure her or discourage her. Chess was in these people's genes, man. I teach a university-level writing course for people who typically aren't in writing-heavy majors, math, science, etc. It's hard to make a 100 in a writing course for anyone because even great writers do something wrong in papers sometimes. A missing citation, argument could be more nuanced, rushed through conclusion, etc. All mistakes that will at least take you from a 100 to a 98 or something. This kid made a stone-cold 100 on every paper. Like, I literally couldn't find anything wrong in any of them. That is bizarre for even great writers. I've never felt more worthless as a teacher because there was just nothing I could suggest to improve unless I started making stuff up. I found out later that he had a 100 in all of his classes that semester, including some really difficult upper-level STEM ones. I don't know if he was a genius, but he's probably the closest I've had, and I wonder if having a 99 average would feel like a disappointment to him. My ex taught primary school, and she gave her class a weekly spelling test and said anyone who bettered their score from last week would receive a chocolate. Most kids got 15 or above out of 20, except for one kid who got 0. She said all the other kids had made fun of him, as kids would, but he was strangely calm about it. Didn't get stressed from the teasing, as most kids would. Next test, he got 1. Same ordeal, but received a chocolate as per the rules. Next week 2, then 3, then 4, receiving a chocolate each week. I didn't fathom a 10-year-old kid could conduct something so cunning. This was an odd 15 years ago, wouldn't be surprised if he was super successful now. Smart kid, but I'm not sure that the right lesson was being taught to him. I have taught at university level for decades and have certainly come across some very smart kids. High success most often correlates with an element of obsession and work ethic. There are, however, 2 students out of the 10,000 plus I have taught who stand out. Student 1 was deeply obsessed with his area of study and just about anything else. He rarely went to the lectures he had signed up for and could be found sitting in the back of classes of every subject you could imagine. He was a socially very engaged person whose enthusiasm was exhausting. His final GPA was very mediocre, a fact that did not bother him in the slightest. He had no interest in the minutiae of undergraduate study. He was working at a PhD level and beyond in his final undergraduate year, sucking every bit of information out of his professors. He ultimately became a high-tech multimillionaire. Student number 2 may be what you're looking for and is the only example I've encountered. This was a very shy and humble young man who took a long time to get to know, but was very engaging once you did. He came from a working-class family with no history of higher education and worked long hours at McDonald's. The first thing I noticed was the truly extraordinary quality of his work, effortlessly solving problems that previous students had not even come close to solving. His ability to pick up complex ideas and even extend them was unrivaled. Other professors reported the same. Pressures of work and many other problems resulted in him not turning up to class often, but he would still ace the course. In his final term, he did not attend a single class of any subject, he simply turned up for the final exam and mid-term. He won the undergraduate gold medal for the university. He sadly now is socially dysfunctional, unemployed, and has been in trouble with the law. I always felt the system did not serve him well. I'm not sure about genius, but I'm currently teaching a very bright student in a class that is supposedly remedial. His home life is horrible and his behavior prevents a serious challenge. But he can skim my notes before a lesson and completely understand it. To keep him engaged, I will sometimes ask him to help me explain a concept, and he can do it just as well, if not sometimes better than I can. He's gotten a 100% on every test and quiz that we've had this year. I asked the principal why the student is in the class that he's in, and he said that administrators won't put him in advanced classes because his behavior is distracting others. I've recommended this student for advanced classes next year, and I have an assistant principal on my side now. We're working with him on his behavior, which has shown improvement, especially in the past few weeks. High school history teacher here. The genius student I had didn't open the textbook once, took very little notes, came to review sessions, yet sat attentively and answered every question I asked aloud correctly. Showed up to all my tests with just a pencil and would be first to finish nearly every time. Only question he ever got wrong was a bonus one in my first month of teaching that asked the students to correctly spell my last name, as the majority never call me anything but Miss. Fantastic all-round kid too. Athlete, in the musicals, social, loved by all. Got into every college he applied for. Michael was 7 when I met him, and what set him apart was his ability to direct his own learning, his well-rounded intelligence, and his genuine love of learning. He was in my 3rd grade class, and it was clear right away that he was smart. Could do any math we gave him, spell anything, reading on a higher level than we tested for. And I teach in a town that's pretty pretentious about its kids. Very high socioeconomic level, tons of kids go to Ivy Leagues, many parents think their kid is a genius. Michael's mum knew he was smart, but didn't seem to get how smart. But he was never the kind to show off or want to impress people. He loved learning and was so excited to share it with everyone. Some noteworthy things he did: taught himself about the stock market. His mum wouldn't let him invest money, so he invested theoretical amounts and then showed her what it would have earned. Came in with an autobiography of George Bush to read during the silent reading. Not a kid version, the official biography. He was able to tell me about it and commented that he disagrees with Bush politically, but felt bad for him because he thought he was pushed into politics by wanting to live up to his dad, but wasn't happy in it. Noticed some languages have similarities, so started mapping out how he thought they were related. This was in 2nd grade. In 3rd grade, he showed me his map and I told him about language family trees, and he was so excited. He got really into language isolates and wanted to learn Basque. Related to this, he made himself flashcards of Greek and Latin roots to help his spelling and vocabulary. Taught himself hexadecimal and binary and was working on other computer languages. He was incredibly socially intuitive and empathetic. He would say to me, "I think so-and-so is upset," and the kid in question would be fine. Inevitably, before the day ended, that kid would have a meltdown or ask to talk to me about an issue. I learned fast to trust Michael's judgment. This also made him a really great friend. He did it with me too. He'd ask if I was okay and I'd be having a really rough day. It was so strange but sweet to have this tiny kid say things like, "Let me know what I can do to support you today." Oh, and I've thought of another. He was also musically very gifted, taught himself some instruments, and could identify pretty obscure musical pieces by ear. He moved at the end of the year and I lost touch. It was so great getting to be his teacher. It's cheesy, but I learned so much about how to teach and support gifted students by working with him. As someone who basically speaks 1.5 languages despite working in both for many years, I'm incredibly envious of just this kid's talent for picking languages up. Wow. I'm a former teacher. Geniuses just know things. There's not much you can teach them in today's schools because they're so far ahead of the rest of the class that you can't teach them and the rest of the students at the same time. I had a student who reads books in class. If I asked her to explain what I had just said, she explained it perfectly without looking up from the book. Some students complained about her making A's while reading books in class while they listened and didn't make A's. I couldn't help that. She was bored in class. I could waste classes' time scolding her, or I could leave her alone. I teach French, and I think I currently have one in my French 4 class. This kid is insane. Knows stuff that I've never explicitly taught, demonstrated on in-class assessments, so no Google Translate happening here. She's also not the cheating kind of kid. She masters difficult grammatical concepts without even needing to practice them. All I have to say is, this is how and why you use the subjunctive. And she gets it. Perfectly. Every time. In speech, in writing, everything she does is meticulous, well thought out, and above and beyond what I ask for. And she's like this in every class. I have good students in my school, really good students, affluent district, but this girl absolutely takes the cake. Helps teach a student at another high school who is an extremely talented arts student. This kid has the ability to take something from concept to in front of you, in reality, in less than a few hours. He helped design and build an entire set for a play we did on a ridiculously small budget. What made him so smart is his ability to think through all of the logical steps of the process immediately. He figured out the potential problems before they happened and took steps to avoid them from the planning stages. To me, this is what makes someone an actual genius. The ability to understand and work through a problem quickly and effortlessly that most others struggle with. It is absolutely incredible just how wide the gap is between the lowest performer and the highest performer in a single classroom. I teach AP Physics among other things, and one of my students got finished with his work in 1/4 of the time through the class and gave everyone at his table the answers just so he could talk with his friends about the particularly relative nature of mathematics. It was fantastic to see. At a table right next to his, I had a student ask me, "Why does NASA need money to build things if they're so important to build? Shouldn't they just build them?" Please support tracked learning. I mean, I think this kid just solved our national debt issue. We don't need to pay anyone. If the work is important, they'll do it. Not a genius per se, but I've had a few very gifted kids in my classes. Sometimes they're just naturally gifted or their parents push them or support them outside of school. Some want to learn as many new skills as possible and absorb all the information you give them. They can be left to work on something as long as it interests them. Others know they're capable of doing very well, but they don't care and slack off a bit because they know they can. It's very difficult to motivate these students sometimes. Sometimes they get bored by the work or don't want to write the reports that go with it. This can sometimes be a problem because most pieces of coursework require certain things which must be in it to receive a good grade, and they question the need for it. One very, very gifted girl I taught was an absolute pleasure to have in class. I remember doing a couple of things on the Nepal earthquakes when they happened last year. I was a geography teacher, and she wrote an absolutely outstanding essay on the impacts and everything, comparing it to some other examples, things like that. I think what really helped her to do so well was the fact that her parents were very, very supportive and nice people, also intelligent, and they kept just enough pressure on her to do well without being helicopter parents. She had a really positive attitude to school and academia in general and could see the value of everything she learned. I spoke to her English teacher after getting this incredible essay, and she said she was writing at a similar level then. By the way, she was 11 and writing at the sort of level and detail I'd expect from my 17 to 18-year-olds. Apparently she read a lot of books and was always just interested. Brilliant stuff. I actually learnt stuff from her on occasion, which was amazing and always made me smile. Anyway, I showed this essay to a member of senior management who thought after seeing it was plagiarism, but she wrote it there in front of me. I miss teaching when I think back to pupils like her. I think the most interesting kid I ever taught was during my teaching practice. He was a 14-year-old kid called David, not especially interested in school, preferring to be outside messing with his mates or playing football, but he had the most interesting style of writing I've ever come across. So articulate and mature, yet with a quirky, humorous edge to it that showed a real independence of thought. I loved reading his work. It's been 10 years since I taught him, and I've yet to come across another pupil of his quality. I only taught him for a few months before I moved to a different placement, but I did take him aside before I left to tell him that I thought he had a real talent he could pursue. There was something innate with him, a real natural flair and talent. Others have achieved great success through pure hard work and determination, but I wouldn't class them as geniuses. I think I'm going to echo the sentiment of many of the other commenters that I read while getting through these stories now. This is a slightly demoralizing read to some of us who didn't come out of the womb with a brain firing on all cylinders with talent in all subjects. Oh well. I don't know if I would say that she was a genius, but there is one student I always think about. This was at a school that is known for having some of the smartest students around, at least in the on-paper sense, that they had great grades and test scores. And this was a class that attracted a lot of the highest achievers, read pre-med requirement. She had the highest average for all of the regular graded work, labs, problem sets, exams, but there's only so far you can stand apart from the others with those, particularly at a school like that. What allowed me to be completely blown away by her was her research papers. This was one of those core courses that had multiple professors, so he had to standardize the material, and there was a standard rubric for how the students were supposed to write the research papers. What essential questions they should be answering along the way, how to do the primary literature research, and how to cite your sources. The papers I got almost always fell into one of two categories: the C or below papers and the A papers. The C papers were from the students who, for some reason, didn't really get it with the rubric and still wrote it like it was a high school paper where they were obviously just rewording what they read on Wikipedia, plus some light cut-and-paste plagiarism from the abstracts of papers they clearly never read, and not enough citations. The A papers were from students who simply followed the rubric to the letter. They answered every question in the paper consecutively as it was written in the rubric, cited their sources, always reading and using just enough papers to be sufficient, and no more, with the occasional sprinkling of the subtle cut-and-paste plagiarism. These papers were usually dull as crap, but often never had so much as a typo, so I pretty much had to give them an A, because they did what I asked them to do. I never liked including the research papers in this course, because the students were clearly not mature enough to really tackle the material in a productive way. They were fine freshman papers, but a waste of everyone's time in the end. Then, one day, I had this student in my class. She never followed the rubric and its dopey questions at all. She thought of her own questions for the topic, the ones that were the most interesting and relevant to that topic specifically. Many of these questions were truly insightful and open-ended as well. She went into the literature and really read and clearly understood these papers that should have been way over the head of any normal teenager college student. Then, on top of that, she would obtain the data from these papers and run her own different analyses using very complex methodologies that I didn't teach until the most advanced courses for seniors and graduate students. So she was clearly just teaching herself as she went along. Lastly, she was a terrific writer, maybe one of the best I've ever read. Her papers always came in way too long for the limit. Normally a sign the paper was an editing nightmare, and I loved reading them. She knew how long the paper needed to be to cover the topic, and my limits were just suggestions she chose to ignore, and rightfully so. She is the type of student I think should get an A, not the other I dotters and T crosses. But alas, in the world of great inflation, about 25% of my students always got A's. I've had a lot of really smart students, but never had another one like her. I love students like that. I teach an honors class, and the kids are so set on following a rubric to the letter that I love to set them up with an intentionally vague assignment in order to spur creativity. For example, to demonstrate that they understand the thematic elements of the literary movement for transcendentalism, I gave them the assignment, represent transcendentalism in another medium. So I actually got projects like a stop-motion video, a fake Tumblr, a children's book, a memory box, paintings, photography, etc. Honors kids tend to get the concepts quicker, but show reluctance if not given explicit instructions. I force them to be more interpretive. I had a student last fall in an Introduction to American Politics course, who was a computer science major taking the course as an elective. This kid absorbed information like a sponge and performed better on exams and essays than any of the political science majors. He would often drop by my office just to chat about politics and statistical programming. He eventually stopped coming to classes many days because I had to dumb down all the material so much for the other students. He still passed with flying colors and had a higher average than anyone else in the class, and eventually started a double major in political science and computer science. Students like that make the job worth the effort. My point here was that not only one single student makes the job worth the while, actually teaching is only 1/3 of my job, in addition to helping advise students and conducting my own research. I devote my position as a professor to all of my students individually, if they're willing to accept that attention. Many students refuse to come to class, complete assignments, study for exams, or show up at all during office hours. This is unfortunate for those students, and if I just described you, then you need to get off Reddit and read a freaking book. The truth is, I love my job very much. If I didn't, I would quit. Simple as that. I came for the story of a genius. I stayed for the repressed, salty rant of a college professor. Fun to get insight into the mind of one of our higher education authority figures. I did, however, it's a bit of a sad story. I worked at a special school for you people labeled as emotionally disturbed. One of my students would finish assignments in under 10 minutes. I would try to differentiate for him, but I'll be honest that I was a new teacher and not very good at it, combined with the fact that I was teaching 5 subjects and dealing with a variety of classroom challenges. Logically, his response was, "Why do I have to do more work just because I'm smart?" He had a fair point, and I couldn't see me forcing him to complete work that probably didn't challenge him anyway. So I let him play RuneScape. Now before you get pitchforks out, let me explain my logic. I, a bit of a nerd myself, understood the mental exercise of contemplating the most efficient or effective means of doing something in a video game, and although I never played RuneScape, figured it offered him an outlet to do something similar. Unfortunately, being a genius isn't all fun and games. Intellectual theorists say the further your IQ is from the norm of 100, the harder time you have relating to the masses. As I mentioned before, I was at a special school. This young man struggled with peer relations and had a crippling anxiety that often manifested in self-harm. He would beat his head on his desk, punch himself, slam his face into the corner of metal filing cabinets, etc. If we were lucky, he would just crawl under a desk and cry and cry. My heart went out to him, as I know sometimes thinking of my future and the world around me can turn into a grim task. I can only imagine how it looked to a young boy placed in a special ed setting when his mind was left to wander. I know my colleagues may disagree, but I still feel RuneScape was therapy. I've had some smart kids, so smart that others think they're a genius, but for me, they're just really clever. That being said, there was this one kid. Not that bright, but he did this one thing that had genius written all over it. I sat there talking him through some trig. Got to the point where it was something like tan 65 and I thought, damn, I forgot to grab a calculator. What did he do? He told me it to the nearest whole number. I was shocked and thought it was a fluke. I gave him another and guess what? He got that right too. He wasn't the brightest kid, but he knew his trig ratios. A kid in Standard Algebra 2 who never did a lick of homework but made hundreds on every test. I talked to him and he said he didn't see the point in wasting his time in homework when he already knew how to do the problems. A month or 2 into the year, I told him I'd just make his test average his grade. I also had a talk with him to say that sometimes in life you can cut to the chase when you know your stuff, but sometimes you still have to jump through hoops that seem stupid even when you don't see the point, and even when there might not be a point. To those saying that's a bad thing to say to an intelligent kid, try starting a business or patenting your game-changing invention without getting the proper government permits, etc. That even though I'm giving him a break, sometimes you have to do your homework, even when it seems unnecessary. As an aside, I later taught information technology, and I told the kids that if they earned their industry certification at the end of the year, A+ or Microsoft Technology Associate, depending on grade level, I'd change their grades so they got an A for the year, because earning the certification proves mastery of the concepts I was teaching. Had a 70 to 80% pass rate, and I really think this policy had something to do with that. It motivated the kids to work hard, and I almost never had to change a grade. Cops. Are there any crimes that you intentionally don't enforce? Just before Thanksgiving, my dad called me and informed me that I had failed to pay a parking ticket and that my license had been suspended. Concerned that I would get pulled over and ticketed, I decided to pay the ticket right there and then on my phone. Since I couldn't print the confirmation screen out, I just took a picture of the screen with my phone so I could prove that I had paid the ticket in the unlikely event that I got pulled over. Well, lo and behold, as I'm driving home for Thanksgiving the next day, I get pulled over by a state trooper. He immediately recognizes that my license was suspended and starts explaining that I was driving illegally and so on and so forth. Before he can lecture me too long, I whip out my phone, scroll to the picture of the ticket payment confirmation screen, and hand him the phone. As soon as he grabbed the phone, he sort of furrowed his brow, and in a completely teed-off tone, he goes, "What the hell is this?" I'm about to calmly explain the situation to him when suddenly he tilts the screen towards me and I'm staring directly at a picture of my eggplant. My freaking heart stopped beating and I could feel all the blood in my body rushing to my face. I had accidentally flipped one picture too far to an eggplant pic I took for some ex-girlfriend when I was hammered, and I had then handed the phone to the cop. Time basically stopped as I was sure he was going to arrest me for some kind of harassment crime and put me on a watch list for life. Mortified, I shakily scrolled back to the payment confirmation pic and handed the phone back to him. He reluctantly looked at the screen, nodded, and then let out a little laugh. As he tossed my phone back to me, he said, "Have a nice Thanksgiving," and walked back to his car shaking his head. I drove home in complete silence and deleted any and all eggplant pics the moment I pulled into my parents' driveway. I am forever in that dude's debt for just laughing it off instead of throwing me in prison. In conclusion, I accidentally showed a picture of my member to a state trooper and he didn't smash my face in with a baton. I will try my best not to arrest a parent in front of a small child. With a misdemeanor, you have quite a bit of officer discretion, but I've gone so far as to wait for an hour or so until a family member can pick up the kid before I handcuff the parent. It just really bothers me. I want kids to trust police officers if they ever need help, not be afraid of them. That's a good level of compassion there. Have to arrest you, but wait until mum comes to fetch the kid so the kid doesn't have a scarring memory of daddy. Driving between St. Louis, Missouri and Dayton, Ohio, I got pulled over around midnight by a cop on the freeway. I was confused a bit since I hadn't been speeding, but my car had California plates, as that's the state where I lived at the time, and I thought, well, maybe I have a tail light out or something. First thing he says when he sees my license and registration, "California, huh? Got a lot of pot in the car?" Because I'm a moron and I was tired, my answer was, "Define a lot." He did not find it funny. Luckily, his partner did. The guy with my license and registration, a younger white guy, kept his stone-cold face and said, "Step out of the car, please," while the older black cop just tried to keep from laughing out loud. "Hands on the hood, feet apart," he says, and he starts to pat me down. "Mind if you tell me what you're looking for?" I ask. "Do you have anything in your pockets that'll harm me? Needles or something?" "I have a Swiss Army knife in my right pocket, but it's all closed up," I say. "How do I know that?" he asks accusingly. Again, I turn into Captain Moron. Because I wouldn't keep a naked 3-inch blade only a couple of inches from my member while driving across the country. This time the older cop does laugh out loud and the younger guy looks flustered. He tells me slowly to turn around with hands above my shoulders, then he backs up 4 steps and says to use my left hand to empty my pockets onto the hood of the car. The older cop just sighs and says, "Hold on a sec, don't move," and pulls the younger guy to the back of the cop car where they have a very private and brief conversation. The younger one gets into the car and gets on the radio, while the older one comes up to me and says, "Look, you know why we pulled you over. Because you were swerving in the lane a bit. Thought you might be drunk. How long have you been driving?" "About 5 hours. I left St. Louis around 7, hoping to make it to Dayton." "You been drinking?" "Diet Coke and Gatorade mostly. No alcohol or anything." "You need some sleep, son. Dayton's still about 45 minutes away. Think you can make it?" To be honest, I was kind of tired, but I think you guys just scared me awake. He smiles, "Alright, hang tight a sec," and walks back to the car. He comes back, You have 2 bench warrants in California, and there's an APB out in the car as stolen after an armed robbery. What? I say. That doesn't make any sense. I never did anything. I'm panicking now. I'm freaking out. In a second, my night just went from boring to awful. Actually, just messing with you. You're free to go. Hopefully that adrenaline will keep you awake for an hour, he says. I laugh and say, Jesus fricking Christ, that is effed up, man. He just smiles and says, take care, stay on the road. I got to Dayton around 1 a.m. and couldn't fall asleep until 3. That dude knew his crap. Well, I'm not a cop, but this happened to me during my substance-using days. This was years and years ago, and I'm proud to be clean now. I was driving to work when a cop recognized me and knew I was driving with a suspended license. He searched my car before he arrested me. As we were pulling up to the jail, he held up a bag of needles he found under my seat. He said, if you promise to quit this, I'll throw these away before we pull into the station. My mom bailed me out a few hours later and took me straight to rehab. That cop was awesome. He saved me from being in big-time trouble, and likely saved my life by scaring me into rehab. You have no idea how often us cops try to do this. If we know someone is a frequent flyer, and we recognize what the underlying problem is, we will go out of our way to solve that problem rather than just making the arrest. Because I know if I can solve this person's addiction, illness, or apathy, then I won't have to continue to take dispatched runs there. I've got junkies and drunks into rehab. I've paid for a young working girl's bus ticket home to Chicago so she could be with her family and her support system. She was in a city all by herself, and her pimp had her so strung out she couldn't tell you what day of the week it was. If I know someone is religious, or their family is religious, I'll use that as leverage to try and get people into rehab. Arresting someone, as said before, is just a tool used to temporarily solve the problem. It's a band-aid, not a cure. By the way, by my estimates, I'd say that 70 to 75% of all domestic-related run-ins have an addiction element in them, substances or booze. 95% of homeless that I've dealt with are addicts themselves, and I'd say 65% have mental health issues. My first run-in with the law at 17. I was driving on a 3-lane highway at rush hour going 85 in the far left lane while tailgating a big SUV. A van parked in the left shoulder suddenly came into view. I had drifted slightly into the shoulder and swerved to avoid sideswiping the van. Being a young, inexperienced driver, I overcorrected. Full panic set in as my Honda Civic slid into the left guardrail, sailed across all 3 lanes of traffic, flipped around facing the wrong direction, and finally skidded to a halt. It shook me up good, but I didn't hit a single soul. Cop: how fast were you going? Me: about 70 to 75? The speed limit here is 55. Are you sure you were going that fast? Maybe I was going faster. It could have been 80 or 85. Him, face palming: the speed limit here is 55. If you are going faster, I have to ticket you for reckless driving. I don't want to ticket you. Tell me, what's the speed limit here? 55? How fast were you going? 55? That's right. You were going 55. Then to the next question. I didn't see any damage to the guardrail that you hit. Did you? I don't know. There could be some damage. I didn't see it. If there's damage to the guardrail, you'll have to pay a few $1,000s to fix it. Now, did you see any damage to the guardrail? I didn't. No, I didn't see any damage either? Good. In conclusion, cop had me change my story so as not to incriminate myself. This sounds like something I can relate to, too stupid to accept the obvious easy out I was being offered. Here's a follow-up comment below. Reminds me, in college I lived on the second floor of a small apartment complex. Everyone in the buildings was students, and 90% of the buildings in the area housed students. The people downstairs were having a decent-sized party that had spilled outside onto the deck and front yard, which isn't really a big deal as it was a weekend night with nothing but students around. A high school student who was at the party had wandered off about a block away and was peeing on a fence. A cop was driving by and turned his lights on. Kid, of course, runs right back to the party, which causes the cops to come and break it up. As the cops arrive, I head back upstairs and watch everything unfold from my balcony. The cops are talking to the guys who live below. Cop: this kid we saw down the street says you're responsible for him. If you are, we have to arrest, ticket, whatever the punishment you, for providing alcohol to a minor. Are you responsible for him? Neighbor: yes, he's my friend. Are you sure you're responsible? Yes. Are you really sure? Yes. If you don't know him, we will just call his parents to pick him up. So are you responsible for him? Oh, wait, no, I've never seen him before. Police officer here. There are plenty I don't enforce, but as stated above, I have enforcement discretion in 99% of situations. My hands are rarely forced to pursue charges where the victim is the state or city. Traffic violations, substance charges, etc. I personally try not to enforce anything that I'd do. I speed sometimes I'll roll a stop sign, and other minor things. I hate working traffic and generally stay too busy bouncing from call to actually do it, so that also has a bearing on what I enforce. Now that being said, I will hammer you if you're causing direct danger to another person. If you're excessively speeding during rush hour, through a school zone, or with kids in your car, then I will issue paperwork all day. But it generally has to be a situation that causes immediate danger to someone other than yourself. If it's 3 a.m. and you're doing 70 in a 50 on a back road, chances are I'm just going to let you be. Also, petty stuff. There's a lot of technicalities written in laws. Sometimes slight variations make something legal become illegal. I try to avoid crap like that. I try to keep a good repertoire with the people in the areas I work in, so taking enforcement action on some bullcrap law is a quick way to make enemies. I've learned over the years that the people I'm nice to today may be the ones who come to my rescue tomorrow. It's happened before. Warnings are my best friend. People appreciate warnings. Usually hey man, you know your headlight's out? Try to get it fixed, okay? Is enough so that next time you see them, it'll be working. And finally, Reddit's favorite subject, Green Herb. I work with a lot of younger guys. We're all pretty progressive and understand that Mary J. prohibition is a joke. Most of us try our best not to take action on a personal use unless we absolutely have to. Sadly, the older guys around here don't share our views on the subject, and what's even worse is that there are sergeants, lieutenants, and captains. Sometimes our hands are forced, but I work with a very good department that does allow us tons of enforcement discretion. Not a cop, but my dad is. This isn't exactly a refusal to enforce a particular law, but he works in an area of higher crime rates and he's always trying to instill a sense of trust in the youth. One day, he was walking back to his patrol car after a call and he saw some younger guys playing basketball. He walks over to them and sternly asks for the ball. They ask him why, but with no explanation, he again tells them to hand the ball over. They disappointedly toss the ball over, thinking it's just another butthole cop trying to ruin their day. Instead, my dad drains a 3 and just walks away. He believes that interactions like this with cops will give the youth a better sense of trust in law enforcement systems. Just thought I'd share. He would have looked like such a tool if he missed. Cop here. I generally don't arrest for small amounts of Mary J. A, I don't think that green herb is bad, and B, it's nearly legalized medicine at this point anyway. I'm not big on ticket writing. Tickets are expensive and almost everyone is broke right now. I find that usually a 2-minute conversation with an officer makes people change their driving habits anyway. Plus they feel super lucky for having caught a break. You need to remember that officers have a lot of discretion. However, if there's a victim and probable cause, that discretion can go away. For instance, shoplifting a $2 item. If the store caught you and insists on prosecution, there's not much that I can do. The thing is, I still have discretion over what to do with a person, i.e. release them from the scene with a ticket, bring them to the station to fingerprint or photograph or issue a ticket and release, or book them into jail overnight. Any contact can turn into a dangerous situation. Go to odmp.org and look at the line of duty deaths just for 2012. 2 of them occurred during regular prisoner transports. Generally, the more dangerous a call seems, the more amped up, aware, and prepared you are. I'm more worried about getting shot as I open the bathroom door after taking a leak at a gas station. I've never thought about the downtime of a police's life being so dangerous, and the fact that a lot of fatalities can occur at the least expected time in it. It does make sense, I suppose. I do not enforce Mary J. so long as 1. It's a misdemeanor account, 2. You're not selling, 3. You're not a prick. That being said, I will make you dispose of it. I'm allergic to it or something. Within seconds of coming close to it, I will get a migraine. Homosexual behavior is still on the books in Texas under deviant behavior. I don't enforce this. The selling of armadillos is against the law in Texas as well. I won't arrest you, but I'm documenting it. It's like a bucket list of offenses I want to come across as a cop. I am not likely to write any traffic citation so long as it's not a hazardous violation and so long as you agree to fix the issue. I usually try and find All drunk's an alternative to jail unless they're driving or fighting. I never let something slide because it might be dangerous. I signed up knowing full well I can die doing this job, and have used myself as a shield to protect people on more than one occasion. I hope this helps. Back when I was a cop, 12 years ago, I never arrested anyone for possession of Mary J. It was pointless, and there are already too many people in jail for what I deem minor possession charges. I remember I stopped a guy. Well, I didn't stop him, he was stopped at a stop sign for 13 minutes before I pulled up behind him. I questioned him, realized that he was baked out of his mind because he told me he was waiting for the stop sign to turn green. Pulled him out of the car, got permission to search, found a bag with about a half an ounce in it, and I went over to him and asked if he had someone who could come and get him. He called his girlfriend, and as we waited, I threw his bag in the ditch. When his girlfriend got there, I said this to him: "I'm gonna sit right over here in that parking lot and do my reports. If I see you back here before I leave, I'll arrest you. I don't care if you come back and get the stuff from the ditch, but it better be after I leave." He didn't come back, but the bag was gone by the time my shift ended. I've always been a proponent of legalizing Mary J. Why? Because if we're at a bar and I'm drunk and I bump into another drunk guy, chances are we're going to fight. If I'm high and I bump into another high guy, chances are we laugh. It can't be legalized for a myriad of reasons that I won't get into here. The premise of the question is inherently flawed because of a common misconception about how policing works. The law is less a set of rules cops have to enforce and more a tool cops have for handling situations. It's pretty rare that cops have to enforce the law. Felonies and certain domestic or abuse crimes are the only ones that have to be charged, and even there, it's not hard to find wiggle room on how you define the crime. For example, public drunkenness is a crime. Do I stand in front of bars and make everyone do sobriety tests? No. Now, if you're yelling and screaming like a jackass and making a scene, I'll come up and tell you it's time to get gone. If that doesn't work, I'll arrest you for public drunkenness and make you bookings problem. So do I choose not to enforce particular laws? Yeah, all the time. It's basically my entire job. And this trickles down into your other questions. Enforcing the law is always weighed against what risks are associated with the arrest, how likely the victims are to testify, and a dozen other factors. Law enforcement is more art than science. Bonus secret: most cops, particularly in cities, don't want to arrest people for the day-to-day silliness. It's a lot of paperwork, you're now responsible for the person while you get them cited or booked, and then you have to go to court on your days off. It's really just a huge pain in the butt. The trick to slipping out of most arrests is about making letting you go less of a hassle than arresting you. Question: when you say making letting you go less of a hassle than arresting you, can you elaborate a little? Less hassle is as follows. Number 1. Get gone. If a cop says move along, your best bet is to be somewhere else. 98% of the time, this is all the bar owners or neighbors want. The last guy standing there arguing about how the Constitution gives him the right to sing "Free Bird" at 3 a.m. on a public street corner usually loses that argument and a chunk of his next paycheck. Number 2. Be a good sobriety wingman. When I'm dealing with the numerous situations that come from drunk people, I usually look for their sober friend because he's the best bet to diffuse the situation. Don't be afraid to step in for your friend and say something like, "Officer, I know he's gotten out of hand, my car is over here, let me take him home, and he won't be any more trouble." Rare is the cop who will pass up an opportunity to make a drunk person someone else's problem. 3. Fight it out in the morning. There's this kind of bizarre belief that cops are going to be your referee for bar fights, domestics, and all kinds of assorted nonsense. We're never going to figure out who was right. We've only been called because the fighting or screaming. If it's a bar thing, just let it go and move on. If it's a domestic, don't try and convince the cop you were right. Convince the cop you're reasonable enough to not fight anymore. Offer to take a walk or stay with a friend. Come back to argue in the morning when you've got a cooler head. In conclusion, cops are there to de-escalate the situation or lock people up. If you're willing to be the one to de-escalate, you're more likely to avoid being locked up. There we go. We not only have a list of crimes that cops are likely to let people walk for, we also have suggestions of ways to increase your likelihood of that outcome. I policed a small town for a decade and have been at a city station for longer. Generally, if I come across a situation where I could use my discretion, I would. For example, I would usually convey a drunk home rather than have them sober up in the cells. For recidivist offenders where a brush with the law was not sufficient, or where a person's behavior warranted more direct action, I would enforce the law to the letter. I'm all about giving people a chance, but only up to a point, even if I don't agree with the penalty that might be enacted at court, or if I don't agree with the law itself. I have never not arrested just because of a dangerous situation. I couldn't live with myself if a failure to act on my part led to a bad day for a member of the public. That, and I don't want to leave a job undone, just so some of my workmates have to come in later to do it. Hopefully that answers your question. I remember during high school prom, 9 to 10 years ago, I had my parents' car. It was a pretty fast car at that time, a 300 horsepower V8. I was driving like a complete idiot, going over double the speed limit. A cop sees me and follows me just as I pull into my friend's driveway. I walk over to him knowing that I've messed up big time. He was pretty intimidating and borderline yelling at me. He eventually let me off, saying he didn't want to ruin my prom night. I was basically yes sirring the entire time while crapping my pants. Wherever this cop is, I have never been pulled over for speeding since. You did a damn good job, and I now race my current car in a controlled track environment. I still love to drive fast, but it never happens on public roads. Arbitrary laws stopping drinking are counterproductive. Sensible drinking should be something that you're brought into. In continental Europe, it's perfectly normal to drink a small amount of wine with a meal. You just mix in water to lower the alcohol content, and drinking sensibly becomes the norm. When you make drinking illegal, all that happens is people start drinking with no prior experience and end up drinking to excess, which in turn promotes violence and makes many areas dangerous at night. I would make a distinction between laws that I chose not to enforce and crimes. I never wrote a speeding ticket for less than 15 over, unless there's an extenuating circumstance, school zone, extremely careless, butthole, etc. I also never got really excited about small amounts of Mary J., a violation as opposed to a crime in the state I worked in. Criminal offenses are a little different. I can't recall ever not enforcing a solid criminal offense, unless it was something small. Criminal trespass where it was easier to just run the person off, or if the person was rolling on someone else, or the victim wasn't interested in prosecution. That doesn't mean I wouldn't write a citation to appear and forward the case to the DA on a weak case or for other circumstances. Also, I once arrested a county commissioner's son for DUI and had a former friend arrested for it as well. I do not believe in breaks for nepotism. There are some circumstances that I'm aware of that police openly ignore some criminal activity because enforcement becomes impossible. Enforcing Mary J. laws at Grateful Dead concerts would be pointless. What's the worst thing your parents have found on your phone or computer? Just so our listeners are aware, you're going to be getting more of an ASMR effect as I speak quieter and closer to the microphone. I've been a little bit sick and I want to avoid tearing my throat. I spent about 5 days in a mental institution about 15 months ago. I gave my mum the passcode to my phone for whatever reason, to either Snapchat people or read my text that I'd received, or something small, in and out like that. Like, she had to click one thing, tell me what it said, respond, and close it. I was 16, by the way. Anyway, when I got home, she told me she found pictures of a negative pregnancy test on my phone from a month or so earlier, and she took me to a doctor. Turns out I had scar tissue in my uterus from a miscarriage 6-ish months earlier. Scared the crap out of me. Very grateful that she did it because the tissue could have inhibited me from having children in the future if it had gotten necrotic or something. I lived with my aunt briefly when I was about 12 years old. One night my uncle hooked me up with a bunch of video games and installed them on my computer. My brother said he saw my uncle find my adult flick stash on my computer, but I assumed he was messing with me. Well, next morning, apparently, my very uptight aunt barged into my room while I was on the computer and told me, "There are some things on your computer you need to delete." I immediately realized my brother was telling the truth, so under my aunt's burning gaze, I went to the adult flick folder to delete it. Only I have so much adrenaline going through me that instead of just deleting the folder itself, I decide to click it open. So now there's a bunch of extra large thumbnails showing on my monitor of hardcore adult flicks, while my aunt is standing right behind me. This gives me another shot of adrenaline and my 12-year-old head is swimming. I try to select all of the files, but my hands are so damn wigged out now that instead of being able to select all the thumbnails to delete them, I keep just double-clicking on an image of a girl getting railed by some gorilla of a man. This happens around 3 more times as I'm physically unable to make my hand work the mouse properly, and all I can think about is my aunt thinking, why in the world does this kid keep clicking on this crap? Eventually, I finally delete everything. Writing this has made me realize that I need to ask my uncle why he decided to be a rat next time I see him. When I was 11, they found out I search, "Does white snow affect cows?" Well, does it? If I recall correctly, most mammals are affected by white snow. With a body weight like that, it's going to be expensive. I don't see what the problem is personally. I Google that kind of thing all the time out of morbid curiosity. Before I had my own computer, I'd use my dad's desktop to browse the internet, listen to music, etc. I would message a friend of mine on Facebook quite a bit. We'd talk about a lot of stuff, but of course, mainly girls from school. Dad saw a few messages that were extremely explicit about a few girls from class, about wanting to be smothered by their various bodily parts and crap stuff like that. One of the most embarrassing moments of my life. Extremely passionate diary entries about Daniel Radcliffe from the Philosopher's Stone era. I was around 11, and the diary entries were in epistolary format. Cringe. Back in 1999 or so, my mum was embarrassed that I had a song called Horny Horns on the computer when we had to get it fixed. I told her it barely had any lyrics and it wasn't naughty at all, but she was worried the computer guy would think it was. When we got the computer back, the guy said I had some interesting taste in music in there, late 90s techno, and she said, "See? The only reason he listened to it is because it had horny in the name. I'm so embarrassed." I can imagine this guy with his pants down, lube, and tissues at the ready, only to click on it and it plays 90s techno. On the other hand, it does take real dedication to your craft to be able to pleasure yourself to a MIDI file. Mum saw my history of adult fun time scenes in TV shows and unspeakable act scenes. It was in 4th grade. I was curious and absolutely mortified. Yeah, I found that stuff when I was 9. Thought it was way too adult for me. So I searched prawn for kids and kid prawn. My parents are probably on some kind of list. This is somehow messed up and wholesome at the same time. Ah yes, the curious kid searches. My son did this as well when he was about that age, except it was a little more gay. He didn't understand what that word meant, so he naturally went to YouTube to see what he could find. So he's seen some stuff at a young age. I accidentally sent my mum a fanfiction about SpongeBob getting the unspeakable act committed against him by a gang. When I was younger, my mum found a lesbian adult flicks on my computer. I blamed it on my grandma. I guess this isn't bad, but it did change my life. My sister went on a shared laptop and I had stupidly left open my internet browser which had pro-anorexia websites and blogs still open. I was 14 or 15. She told my mum, who thought it was a cry for attention, but it really wasn't. I was furious that they'd found this and was promptly sent into a network of doctors for my eating disorder. Kinda pre-rehab for those who aren't physically needing hospitalization but mentally are messed up. It was a rough 4 years, but who knows where I'd be if I hadn't gotten the help I needed back then. I'm doing much better now. ED conquered. Nothing, 'cause I'm the best at hiding stuffs. Hid my brother 7 years ago and no one has found him yet. My mum found a Tumblr post when I was 18 where I'd said, "Wow, today I got 4 piercings and did it in the butt for the first time. #eventful." Like others have said, my browser history. However, my mother printed them out, like Excel format, 4 or 5 pages long like some sort of really screwed up Walmart receipt. She then sat me down and read them aloud back to me in front of my 2 brothers. I tried the old political fallback of deny, deny, deny when she dropped the bombshell. My email login was at the top and bottom of every list. This is really bad, but when I was 13, I was super afraid the zombie apocalypse was going to really happen. So I found and downloaded the Army's Improvised Weapons and Munitions Handbook. Yeah, imagine a 13-year-old with a file labeled explosives on his laptop. Man, I now understand why kids thought I was going to shoot up the school when I mentioned mixing 2 ingredients would make it go boom in chemistry. Plus, I probably ended up on a list somewhere. Now that I'm thinking about it, I might have a flash drive with the book somewhere in my room. To all the people asking for a link, yeah, I'm not going to go down for distributing bomb-making material, so no thanks. And we're all poorer for it, sir. Share your crazy prepper life with us so we can devour it wholesale. Wet, word for female anatomy, games.com. And then I learned about deleting history. Literally the same thing happened to me. All I think about is how happy I am I learned that lesson before I realized I was gay. Parents didn't find, I found on the family computer. My brother would stay up late and look up a bunch of adult flicks and he wouldn't clear the browser history. I, being a very nice brother, would clear it every morning. Eventually, I got so sick of having to do that I changed the desktop wallpaper to say, "Please remember to clear your browser history." That's pretty great. How did he respond to that? He probably thought it was from his parents. Imagine that feeling. I did this to my dad once. Looked up the song Redbone on his phone and it auto-filled to RedTube. Changed his home screen to an image saying, "Clear your history." I did a kind of similar thing to my dad once when I was 15. I was looking for a movie to watch on his computer. He torrents movies instead of buying them because he travels for work a lot, and it's easier to have movies and TV shows on files rather than dragging DVDs and stuff around. But anyway, back to the story. And instead of having a nice Harry Potter movie to watch, I found his adult flick stash. I still to this day have no idea how I came across it, considering I've downloaded movies from his laptop numerous times. I renamed all the files to names like, "I know what you're doing," and "Ew," and "Father, I love you, but can you put these somewhere I can't find them, please?" I wonder if he found them. It has never once been discussed. My mum randomly asked for my phone, so I was like, "Sure." She went through my phone and I had forgotten that I'd downloaded a video from Pornhub about a few days before. She found it and it was a woman riding a guy on a couch. I was in 7th grade. Makes me cringe and laugh. Reminds me of my experience. She walked into the room I was in while I was on my laptop and read what I was reading over my shoulder. All adult fanfiction. I was like 12. She took my computer away and made me go pray. I'm female. I was around 12 years old when my dad found bondage searches on the computer. My searches for big-chested women as well. It was a very, very awkward talk. He taught me how to delete my browsing history too. I'm 23 now, so 11-ish years ago. We're best buddies and text basically every day. Even though his princess might have turned out to be into lesbian bondage stuff, I'm still his favorite kid, out of 5 kids. You're also my favorite out of his 5 kids. I was looking for a way to get high from household items. My mum was not happy or proud. She called me about it when I was 30 minutes into a weekend-long road trip. Sorry, Mum. When I was about 13, my mum found some satanic memes on my phone. They were jokes and pretty much parodies of just girly things on Tumblr. You know, like getting your nails matching with your best friend, just girly things. Like those, except she found one that went, sacrificing your best friends to Satan and pledging your allegiance to the Dark Lord, just girly things, with an image of someone holding a hammer and a nail on top of Justin Bieber's head, when he was just a coconut head, and ready to pound it. Some real edgy humor. Boy, did this land me in hot water. My mum found it, swore I was legitimately satanic, and started shaking and putting her hands over me talking about, "The power of Christ compels you, you leave, demon," and crap like that. Was I really satanic? No, just freaking edgy and dumb in the 8th grade. She tells the family she thinks I'm satanic. She tells the pastor at my local church that she thinks I'm being persuaded by Satan to do evil crap. That I'm giving into temptation. So cue me in this pastor's office as it's a private church/school and he has an office. And he talks to me about why Satan is evil and why I may feel like following him and not God. What's wrong? What's my home situation like? Just took a very awkward conversation when he realizes I'm some naive kid who probably didn't really follow Satan. Took a while for her to believe I wasn't trying to be satanic. She probably still thinks that I was serious, and if it wasn't, then it was too edgy and dark for me to be joking about at that age. But yeah, that's the worst thing. Never been caught lacking with adult flicks. Satanic memes, on the other hand, yes. It does baffle me how much of children's moral guidance seems to be placed in the hands of religious leaders in some places, instead of, educators and trained caregivers. Also, the next video contains numerous references to a particular form of Japanese media consisting of tentacles and adult content. I've invented my own word for it so that this video doesn't get taken down and demonetized. Thanks. Okay, Mom, firstly, you need to understand that this isn't prawn, right? It's called octoprawn. Yes, that's a Japanese phrase. I'm learning Japanese from these videos. Before I get to the part about learning Japanese, though, let me comment first on the cultural implications of octoprawn. After the Second World War, which Japan lost after the nuclear bombs were dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, the entire country underwent a period of self-reflection and soul-searching. They wanted to understand how events led to the rest of the world responding with such devastating atomic attacks. This led to a strong antipathy towards warmongering and international aggression. You may have heard about how the Japanese constitution doesn't allow the country to have an active military. Same idea. A lot of post-war Japanese culture is a reflection of such attitudes. For example, the Godzilla movies are not just about giant monsters fighting each other, they're about the horrors of unbridled atomic technology. Godzilla is always depicted as being powered by or healed by nuclear power, and how such a horrifying force can never be allowed to be unleashed on humanity again. On a similar note, Japanese animation enjoyed a resurgence of popularity after the war, due to the populace choosing to turn towards the comforting images of their youth. Japanese kids, much like the kids in our country, like to watch cartoons. As a result, psychologically speaking, cartoons represent a reminder of the simpler and more innocent age. This upsurge in popularity resulted in animated images pervading almost all of Japanese culture, from movies to television to advertising to music videos and so on and so forth. And because animated images were so widely accepted throughout Japan, they were used for almost every type of source material, or to tell any type of story. Animation was no longer the sole domain of children. You got animated movies that told very mature stories, like Ghost in the Machine or Nausicaa of the Valley of the Wind. Sometimes you get stories that involve very mature topics, like war, or murder, or the unspeakable act, or torture. The Japanese have generally become quite accustomed to seeing depictions of such things in their animations. So yeah, that's why I was watching this movie. It's an epic tale about a space crew exploring a distant planet. The crew's all female because Japan's very into gender equality, and they run into a hostile alien with a bunch of tentacles, and well, I don't want to spoil the story for you, but let's just say the crew eventually figure out how to get along with the alien. It's a story about bridging cultural gaps and finding common ground. Seriously, it's worth watching. Okay, next, you remember how I talked about knowing Japanese words and phrases now? It's because these movies are subtitled in English, so I could learn Japanese while watching them. I mean, I know words like yamete and ai and igu and lots of others. Much better than just knowing konnichiwa, isn't it? I mean, I'm developing such an interest in Octopron that I might just be a major in Japanese when I go to college. Who knows, I might be the one writing the subtitles in the future. Oh, and one last thing, you should know that Octopron's considered pretty mainstream in Japan now. And it's also quite common in the Western world now too. Everyone's watching it. I mean, if I don't watch it, I'd be seen as some sort of freak at school. You don't want your son to be some kind of pariah because he doesn't watch Octopron now, do you? I was actually 20 when this happened, but it's still a good story. Eating dinner at a restaurant with mum, aunt, uncle, grandmother, roommate, and a couple of family friends. I take out my phone to show my roommate, who sat beside me, a couple of funny selfies I took wearing his glasses. I'm swiping right to show him more photos, and then there's an eggplant pic. A big, veiny, red old eggplant pic. We both jump violently in surprise. I make a sort of squealing sound and we both blush. My mum is sat opposite us and gives us a funny look. She looks like she's about to ask, then decides against it. We eat dinner. When I was like 16 or 17, my parents found an exposed picture on my phone that I sent to my boyfriend at the time. They each separately came into my room to lecture me, /cry about me being a heathen, and then held up the picture of my bare butt the entire time. And then they came in together to pray over me because they thought Satan was trying to take over my body. Undressed photos of my then girlfriend. She thought I had them to blackmail her if I needed to and made a big story out of it, including talking to her father. They found out through my browser history that I was an active participant of a pro-anorexia forum, and they read all of my pathetic posts on there. I also had an accountability thread where I kept track of how much I starved myself, so they were really thrilled to find out about that. That wasn't a good time at all for me. Oofed. We all hope you're doing better now, story writer of that post. That disorder is no joke. Obligatory, not me but my sister, blah blah. Anyway, my sister is showing my grandparents something on her phone. She walks away for a moment to talk to me, then goes to take her phone back. The first thing that she notices is that the Google Assistant was scrolling through her gallery and was showing off the personal pictures she sent to her boyfriend. She's hoping it didn't show, but my grandparents are looking at her very strangely. Thankfully, she had underwear on in the pictures and they didn't include her face. We were able to write it off as being from our weird cousin, but it was still too close for comfort. Google Assistant was barred from gallery after that. What have mine found? Octopron I saved years ago as a curious preteen. What haven't they found? About 40,000 words worth of adult fiction that I've written. So this was funny. I must have been about 15 at the time. My half-sister, 3 years younger, was caught by her dad looking up adult flicks. To be fair to her, my mum decided to search both hers and my search history. Oh no, JPEG. I played it cool while my mum scrolled through months of my search history. I sat in my room watching YouTube or browsing the internet every day. Lots of adult flicks. Worst thing she finds is a Shane Dawson video titled, "She Licked My Ball, XD," or something like that. Oh my god, what is this? It's just a silly YouTube video, click on it, it's okay, I swear. She gets bored after a few minutes. Continues scrolling for a few more months worth of search history. Okay, son, glad to know I can trust you. And gives me a hug. I pleasured myself that night to some hardcore crap, praying my thanks to the incognito gods. I regret nothing. One time back in the day, my brother printed out an exposed girl photo from our family computer and printer. It was not HD, to say the least. He apparently hid it in the household computer desk. Mum confronts us a while later about a picture from a web address called Dumpster Hussies. We never got in trouble of any sort, but think she was more worried about viruses. Also, I'm pretty sure one time my mum went to the printer and there was a backlog of orders yet to print, and they were also adult flicks of some sort. When I was much younger, middle school, my mother happened to grab my phone to look for something, and just my damn luck, I'd forgotten to close out of the hub. Especially unfortunate was the fact that when I was 18 and abused ads played as a banner, and my unsuspecting mother tapped that ad, that's what she thought I was watching. So now she thinks I'm into that very unpleasant side of adult flicks, and I had quite the talking to. Thank God she didn't scroll down and see what I was actually watching. Embarrassing to admit, but gay stepbrother fanfiction. Between Will Ferrell and John C. Reilly? Phineas and Ferb? I went through a period where I obsessively looked at adult flicks, about 12 years old. I actually wouldn't pleasure myself or anything, I just watched it because the concept of adult fun times was so new to me. The problem was, I would do it on my mum's computer because I didn't have it on my own. I would do it when she was out of the house walking our dog, but I never knew she was coming back until I heard the click of the front door lock opening. So I had about 4 seconds to close the browser and run to a different room and act like nothing was going on. Well, one day I was a few seconds too late and my mum poked her head into the office just as I was closing the tab. She immediately checked the history and found everything. Her solution was to remove the door from the office room so I couldn't have privacy in there. This was roughly 5 years ago when the entire family shared a computer, and a very crappy one at that. Overheated in an hour of cancerous Facebook game playing, and browser tabs constantly froze. One time I didn't get lucky enough for the tab to close in time for my dad to gain sight of the screen. The whole tab went blank, as that's what it tended to do when it froze, yet the title of the tab only read one word, which my father had to read, knowing full well it was an intentional search. Horse anatomy. My dad saw my interest in computers at an early age, so he bought me one. There wasn't any real pop-up blocker standard back then, so I stumbled upon videos of girls mud wrestling somehow. One thing led to another, and my dad ended up finding my search history. The next day, my dad took away the computer and gave me the talk. Imagine your small, frail librarian, my mother, sitting across from you reading out loud the names of those websites, www and .com included. She just put out her finger every time I tried to talk, fixed her glasses, and continued. My dad once found a not-safe-for-work conversation I was having with a male interest at the time. He read the entire thing back to me, aloud, told me I could be found guilty of being a hussy in a court of law, and showed his friends the entire conversation, including pictures, because it was appalling and disgusting and he needed advice. What can kill you easily that people often underestimate? Staircases. Friend of mine slipped, broke his neck, and died. He was 21. As a kid, I remember trying rollerblades down the stairs. One moment, I'm on the top of the stairs, and the next, I'm waking up at the bottom of the stairs with no memory of having fallen. Only some bruises, and I didn't tell my parents in fear of the slipper. Someone else in the vehicle not having their seatbelt on. If your 150-pound passenger isn't wearing a seatbelt, they turn into an unrestrained 150-pound sack of meat and bone during a collision or rollover. That can definitely mess you up if they smack into you. When I met my husband, he never wore his seatbelt. I'm an easygoing girl who doesn't tell him what to do. Except for that. I said that was a deal breaker. So he wears his seatbelt now. Jump ahead a few years. When my husband and I were test driving his car, I turned around and told the car dealer to put his seatbelt on. He laughed. My husband was like, she's serious. You better put it on. I don't know why this makes me smile. Maybe the look on the dude's face when I lectured him about being a torpedo. I said I could not care less what happens to him, but he will not be killing me or my husband. This is how I feel about all reckless driving. If you want to put your life in danger when you're behind the wheel, do it alone on an empty road. If people want to gamble with their own lives, then fine. That's their prerogative. But they're selfish Fs when they put each other's lives at risk. Water, lakes, pools, etc. People forget how easily their children or themselves can get into trouble while around water. Floating down a lazy river with some beer and friends is, I think, one of the greatest experiences in this life. The most recent time I did this, I drank a lot, and then got separated from my group. At some point, I was kicking to get my floaty to shore, and it suddenly occurred to my inebriated self just how much danger I was in. If I slipped off my raft, I gave myself 50-50 odds of being coordinated enough to get out of the water. At best, and there was no one around to help me. I made it, obviously, but I still shudder when I remember that moment. Perhaps the closest I came to death, and I've been hospitalized on multiple occasions. Yep, I'm a pretty strong swimmer, but it's interesting how even 100 meters stretches out when you're not in the pool, or have circumstances like inebriation or rough conditions. A brief moment of distraction while driving. Just driving in general, you're moving at a high speed in a metal box relying on paint and lights to guide you, while also hoping literally every other driver does the same and doesn't make a mistake. From an emergency medical services point of view, showers, smack, and motorcycles. But the number one cause of injury, according to an overwhelming majority of patients, is not doing anything. Ladders. OSHA posts workplace fatality stats online. Literally every other entry is someone falling to their death from the top of a ladder. The ocean. I live in Australia, and the people from overseas just don't understand how dangerous the ocean can be. Tip for a visitor if you come to Australia, make sure you swim between the flags. That way the lifesavers can keep an eye on you and stop you from getting into trouble. Visited Australia in the summertime a few years back. We went diving on the Great Barrier Reef. Everyone had to wear a jelly suit, full-body, one-piece, thin wetsuit type of thing, because there are jellyfish so small you can't see and are so powerful they can kill you. Even if you were just swimming, not diving, you had to have this suit on. Back on the boat after our dive, some folks on the boat are swimming and start lowering their toddler into the water to swim. No jelly suit. The boat captain starts freaking and yelling at them to stop. None of them speak English. It was crazy. One of the other passengers ended up translating for them, but I think the fear of the ocean got lost in translation. They didn't seem concerned. The ocean and its inhabitants are no joke. Also, people who are not in good physical shape at all and cannot swim very well in calm waters, thinking they can handle swimming too far out into the ocean because it seems calm enough. I'm from the US and only have experienced East Coast beaches, so nothing compared to Australia. People still underestimate how powerful the ocean really can be everywhere. Tylenol, number one leading cause of acute liver failure in the US. ETA. Tylenol is acetaminophen, also called paracetamol. The limit is 4 grams per day. That's just 8 extra-strength Tylenol pills. Other drivers, especially the drunk ones. The amount of children who are now orphans because someone decided to drink and drive is very depressing. Blood clots can form in your legs due to inactivity and then travel to your lungs, which is fatal. Can confirm. Was a fairly active 24-year-old college student when I was on bed rest for multiple surgeries. Ended up getting a pulmonary embolism and being put on warfarin for over a year. Best part was when I went into a walk-in clinic complaining of pain of an 11 out of 10 in my chest, and the doctor said I had acid reflux and I had to beg him to x-ray me. Still think back about how easily I could have died if I didn't insist on more tests. If this video is making you feel a general sense of nervousness, dread, and stress at the frailty of life, don't worry, that is happening to the scriptwriter, narrator, and editor of this video as well. Cars. I babysit and nanny for 2 different families, and all of the kids have said their parents let them not wear their seatbelts. And I'm like, what the frick, you could die. You will wear your seatbelt in my car, and I won't move until you do. Alcohol withdrawals. They are some of the worst withdrawals you can put your body through, and in some cases it's worse than smack withdrawals. A lot of substances can just cold turkey off, but I'd recommend weaning off alcohol slowly just so you don't shock your body so hard. This more applies to hardcore alcoholics and not so much to your occasional drinkers. I never knew this until 6 months ago. My dad is an alcoholic. Mum calls me up saying that he's firing his gun in the garage. I race over and convince him after 2 hours to get in the car. Take him to the hospital, and upon release, doctor says if and when he decides to turn his life around, do not stop drinking cold turkey. It will kill him. Alcoholic here. I've gone through withdrawal numerous times, and even then I don't think I've approached delirium tremens more than 3 or 4 times. You know that feeling when you hold your breath for too long, and your body is just going, "Fricking breathe, we need it." That's what it feels like when you're withdrawing from alcohol, except it's all over your body and there's nothing you can do but ride it out. It tends to come on anywhere from 8 to 12 hours after your last drink, and peaks around 12 to 14 hours after. I've read if you can make it 24 hours, your chances of having a seizure at all fall dramatically. If you've timed it wrong, you withdraw at night. Forget sleep. You're going to toss, turn, sweat, and if you're really unfortunate, you'll nod off a little and borderline hallucinate. It's not something I'd recommend. I'd say nighttime is the wrong time for it because, at least in my experience, if you can do it during a busy day, then you at least have crap to do that can distract you. The scariest thing is going through all of this knowing this might be the one that kills you. It's no secret that alcohol withdrawals can kill, at least among alcoholics. You lie on your bed and sweat, wondering if you'll finally have the seizure that sends you to rehab. Take it easy on the booze, folks. It's literally poison. Automatic garage door opener springs. Do not try and fix or replace them on your own. They're deadly. I can vouch for this. Not the deadly aspect, but the more dangerous than you realize, especially while standing on a ladder aspect. Lesson learned. Garage doors are seriously heavy, and those springs make it seem feather light. There's a crap ton of potential energy in them, and unleashing all of it at once is violent. I've heard that they can embed themselves in walls. Garage door springs are very high on my things to absolutely never F with list, higher than angle grinders and snapping turtles. Being knocked unconscious for too long is super bad for you. It's a lot shorter period than you'd think to get deadly. Some historians theorize that this is what caused Henry VIII to become so unstable. His horse literally flipped on top of him and he stopped breathing for a bit, was unconscious for a few days afterwards. He was very intelligent and a great leader before it, and ended up becoming super paranoid and violent afterwards. Stairs, especially for the 60-plus people, but anyone at any age can fall down stairs. Then they're in debt because of the medical bill and sometimes paralyzed, or your neck gets crunched and you die. This happened a couple of months ago. My sister-in-law's family had a family friend visiting them out of state for a couple of days. They said he would make comments about how steep their stairs were and that someone could easily die falling down them. Well, one night they heard a loud crashing noise and they found the guy unresponsive at the bottom of the steps. Was pronounced dead at the scene when the paramedics arrived. I kinda half-assed making sure both ways were clear before I crossed the road the other day. Then I suddenly realized that even though I do it every day, so it's monotonous and seems like no big deal, not looking both ways is the difference between getting across the road safely and getting hit and killed by a car on the way back from buying a can of Pringles. The narrator can confirm that once in a state of exhausted delirium after an all-nighter finishing an essay, he was struck a glancing blow by a car when he didn't check both ways on the road. Easy, deadly mistake to make, folks. Easter flowers. They've been known to kill dogs and small children. Highly toxic. I had a dog that ate one and I had no idea they were poisonous. Few minutes down the road and he started projectile crapping and puking in a circle. I thought he was going to die. It only takes a few for a human to ingest and it'll kill you. Those stupid yellow flowers people plant everywhere. Tulips, narcissus, and I assume daffodils, or maybe that's the same thing, and calla lilies, will kill your animals and also you. I think irises are also on the no-no list. I'm glad your dog was okay. Crowds. The closest I ever came to death was being about 10 feet from the stage at Lollapalooza 94 when the Beastie Boys came on. Parliament Funkadelic was on right before them, and everyone was just dancing, nobody was rushing the stage. The Beastie Boys banner dropped, and I turned around to several thousand people running at me at full speed. I got caught in the pit, and I'm a small person. I was immediately pushed away from my friends. The Beastie Boys were actually yelling at the crowd, telling them that the ladies had as much right to be up front as the guys, look out for friends, etc. People were grabbing my hair and my clothes to stay up, because almost everyone around me was a shirtless guy and pretty slippery with sweat. All the air was up around 6 feet off the ground and I'm a whopping 5'3". Some very aware and awesome strangers noticed I was about to pass out and was only upright because I was being held up by the crush of people around me, and they passed me overhead to the security guys on stage. I easily could have died in that crowd. This is so true. I have a huge respect for folks who watch out for people around them in the crowd at live events. I was once knocked unconscious for a moment by an accidental elbow to the head from a dude next to me, and then came to my senses and realized someone was holding me by the armpits, not letting me fall. And I'm not exactly a small guy. If not for this stranger, I could have easily been trampled and injured seriously. So stay aware in the crowd, folks, for yourself and others. Deer. Stupid, paranoid murder machines with knives on their heads. Most animals will kill you for a reason, or to eat you, but not a deer. Fricking deer. Not only are they psychotic during mating season, but if you hit a buck in your car, the antlers can impale you if they come through your windshield. They are a lot bigger up close than most people realize. I've always found them kind of intimidating. A short fall. A friend fell from about 3 feet and landed on his head. You're still missed. Carrying a bunch of junk in your car. If you wreck, that crap will hurt and or kill you. A bag of canned dog food almost got me. Some diseases that are vaccinated for, such as measles and pertussis, whooping cough, are much more dangerous and carry a higher risk of deadly complications in infants and very young children than in older children and adults. This is one reason why the herd immunity avoided by widespread vaccination is so crucial. Infants cannot be vaccinated against such diseases, but their risk of contracting them can be greatly reduced by those around them being inoculated. Selfies in dangerous locations. I keep an eye on the Wikipedia list of death by selfie. In Nabarangpur, Odisha, India, a man tried to take a selfie with a wounded bear and was mauled to death. Good stuff. I live in an area with a lot of touristy spots near beaches, and some guy died because he was trying to get a selfie over a blowhole. Not next to, over, as in he stood on top of it hoping to somehow get a good pic of it blowing under him? Don't know the logic behind that, but yeah, he got blown off, obviously into the water, and got swept out to sea, all for the selfie. Somehow it feels okay to chuckle about people dying for the perfect selfie. Obviously it's a huge tragedy, but death resulting from trying to prove you're living in the moment feels oddly poignant. A single punch. It takes disturbingly little effort to kill a human. We are incredibly durable in most ways, but a solid punch to the throat or temple could easily kill on accident. Don't forget the chest. If you bop someone in the right place at the right time, off goes the heart. There was a youth lacrosse player a few years back that was working on his shot. One of his shots hit the crossbar and came back and hit him in the chest at the exact right time and killed him. There was also a minor league hockey player that died from a puck to the chest. The woods. People without much survival knowledge don't seem to realize that nature doesn't give an F about you. The weather, the wilds, the animals, all will kill you as soon as you mess up. I used to teach a wilderness survival course at a scout camp. Eagle Scout represent. A knowledge of how lethal mostly everything in the wilderness is sobering. Drink bad water, get the projectile craps and vomits, and die of dehydration. Eat bad food, or hell, just put food in your body that it's not used to, get the projectile craps, vomits, and die of dehydration. Get wet and stay wet, even in the middle of summer, probably develop hypothermia once the sun sets. Get an open wound, cut, or scrape, it's gonna get infected. Annoy a wild animal, get attacked. And it doesn't even have to be a big traditional predator like a wolf or bear. One kid at the scout camp had to be rushed to the hospital because he and friends cornered a raccoon and was annoying it. Another scout in a different troop got too close to a tom turkey and got mauled. So on and so forth. Yes, I love the woods and I spend quite a bit of time in them, but that means I have a healthy respect for what it can do, and I am prepared. Brain aneurysm. Can happen anytime. You can be the healthiest man in the world and take care of your body all the time and still die from one. And alligators. Eat my eggplant, jungle. Often, alligators paired with brain aneurysms, though the correlation has not been clearly established. Hippos. They may look like harmless, friendly giants, but if you get too close to them, they will absolutely mess you up. Giving birth. Just because we've been doing it for millions of years doesn't mean it won't kill you. Food. Plain and simple. Between unknown allergies, choking, foodborne illnesses, overeating, and a plethora of other possibilities, food is the silent killer that no one expected. Cows. Cows? Cows. They kill more people than sharks. How does a cow kill a shark? Thank you, commenters. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for that little exchange in this dark topic. This is dark, but depression. A lot of people think it's not as bad as it is, and it can get pretty bad. Not depressed anymore, but it was pretty bad, and your brain being so chemically ill, it will tell you things that you would really wonder how you believed it when you're not struggling anymore. This is very true. There's nothing worse than feeling worthless, even when you're surrounded by people who say otherwise. There's nothing worse than losing all enthusiasm for your passions. There's nothing worse than wanting to sleep so you can avoid the waking world. I've lost friends and family to depression. I suffer from it myself, and it's the only problem I can't seem to solve. One of my favorite descriptions of what depression and suicidal tendencies is like is something along the lines of, depression is like being in an upper floor of a burning building. Each day the flames rise up another floor. Some days the firefighters are able to bring the flames down, and other days the flames jump 10 floors. Eventually, it gets to the point where the pain of jumping out of your window is less than the pain and effort of continuing to fight the flames. My therapist quoted someone who I can't remember now, but it was something like the above. David Foster Wallace from the novel Infinite Jest. Swimming in lakes, because there's amoeba and bacteria that can kill you if you have any open wounds or if it gets in your mouth and eyes. Brain-eating amoeba or Naegleria fowleri. It's found in drinking water too. Not living in an area where they're common? I think the greatest danger to me would be the mother fricker who's leaving scorpions in my shower. Fricking everything. Yourself. Between the ages of 10 and 34, taking one's own life is the second most common cause of death, second only to unintentional injury. On average in the US, there are 121 such incidents per day, and the rates in LGBTQ communities are 3 times higher than the national average. Be kind to yourself, people. Emus and cassowaries. Something emu war. Darn, foiled again. I mean, they're giant velociraptors. Who can blame them? Running in front of a train. Seriously, I see people do this a few times a month on my way back to work. If the arm is down, don't run, especially when there's more than 2 tracks. Nobody bothers to look down the freight train tracks. In South Florida, we just got a new passenger train running at 79 miles per hour, on tracks that formerly only had nighttime freight trains at 55 miles per hour. Current score is 7-0, with the passenger train winning against idiot pedestrians. Horses and horseback riding. Even decades-long experienced riders die from injury and accidents. It's not just the ones new to horses and the sport. A coach I had lost her husband in a barrel racing competition from injuries after a bad fall. I myself have fallen off and was stomped on by accident when the horse got upset in a storm. My spleen almost ruptured and I was off work for 3 weeks. They're large 1,200-pound squirrels that can and will spook at the most unexpected crap because it's hardwired into their instincts as prey animals. People don't understand that horses communicate with a lot of subtle physical clues that will let you know a few minutes in advance before it acts out of fear and/or self-defense of itself or its herdmates and offspring. I'm constantly watching ears, eyes, hoofs, and leg positions, tail activity, facial expressions, and body posture when I'm grooming one of the horses. Both for changes in mood and because I know I'm doing my job right when grooming if the horse is truly relaxed and happy around me. Working with the horses I do and riding has been one of the best things that's ever happened to me. I love the animals I work with and care for, but I do not drop my guard when it comes to safety. Not only for myself, but also for the other barn girls and the horses. I would be devastated if someone suffered from something careless that I did. In conclusion, leave unfamiliar horses alone and never work around them without safety for yourself and the animals in mind. What's something harmless your parents did to you as a kid that really screwed you up as an adult? My dad was a huge yeller. Any little thing that went wrong was a full-on expletive-filled barrage. It never scared me or anything because he wasn't violent. However, in my adult life, my wife and I will argue and she'll tell me to stop yelling. I don't have the same yelling scale as other people, it seems, so I think I'm holding back and she thinks I'm yelling. It's very difficult to judge internally, but I'm working on it. My dad's yelling made me terrified of people raising their voices. Same. I full-on panic if I hear that particular tone in someone's voice, even if it's not directed at me. Fortunately, I'm not a yeller myself, though. It's actually really sad. I think his father was far worse, so it's just how he communicates, and I'm not sure he's aware how hurtful it is to others. I'm not yelling! My father yelling. Making it a rule that I could hang out with friends once a week until I graduated high school. I started losing friends very, very quickly. People just wouldn't invite me places because I could never go. The nights I could go out, I had to be back by 8. In high school, before high school it was earlier. so I really didn't have anyone. Nobody wanted to hang out from 5 to 8 on a Friday night. They wanted midnight or so. I completely lack the confidence to make friends now. I haven't had a friend over in years. I'm 28 and my birthday is coming up. When I turn 30, I can't have a party. I'd have nobody to invite. I had a boyfriend throw me a surprise party for my 24th. His friends showed up and my family showed up. It was uncomfortable seeing like 10 people at a bar be my party when none of them were my friends. My brother ended up inviting his friends to add more people. My dad has an issue of making fun of people's appearances and then quickly saying, "I'm just kidding," followed by compliments. I've realized over the years that this has really messed with my self-esteem. It made me really self-conscious and I never really think I look good. I think in the father's defense, there can be an art to doing this with, and I can't stress this enough, with the right people. Don't do it to your kids all the time. My mum used to joke a lot about my looks. If I stayed in the car for something, she would say, "Show me your ugly face. Good. Now no one will want to kidnap you," etc. Everything she said was, "Because it's funny. You know I don't mean it. You love me because I'm like this." But all it's done is leave me with a mean sense of humor to train myself out of, and constant negativity about myself. I had kinda the opposite experience. My mum would tell me little tips on improving my acne without provocation, then try to tell me I looked just fine. Mixed signals about whether or not I looked fine or not has left me unable to see myself as attractive in any way. After hitting puberty fairly early, anytime my parents saw me in a bathing suit or a tank top and shorts or anything remotely form-fitting, they'd start making jokes about how I was getting fat and needed to watch out if I wanted to stay pretty. I doubt they'd even remember doing it, it was so offhand, but it stuck with me. I was never even remotely close to overweight. I was developing curves, like women do at that age, so by high school I had an eating disorder. I'm at my heaviest now, in recovery, and my BMI has never been above 22. But there's a voice in the back of my mind that I have to fight all the time that tells me actually, I'm on the brink of obesity and I won't be pretty anymore if I eat the second piece of pizza or if I skip out on my 7th day in a row at the gym. My parents did the exact same thing. Offhand little comments, I'm sure they never paid 2 seconds thought. That impacts me to this day. My mother was horrified when I repeated a comment she made to me as a teenager about me eating so much that I'd be as big as a house. Thought there was no way in God's earth she'd ever say that. And I'm like, okay, then why do I remember it 10 years later? And also, why do I have an eating disorder? It almost makes it more hurtful when it's offhand or unintentional. Then you second guess and wonder if they're making jokes to gently tell you their real feelings. Same as you, I've never realistically been overweight, but I have no ability to look at my body and see what's really there. But I'm starting to get better, and I'm glad to hear that someone else is too. Using fast food and candy as an incentive for everything. I was morbidly obese by 11, and high school is rough when you're heavy. It took most of high school to reach a normal weight, and I still count calories and watch my diet carefully to sustain it. There's ample evidence which shows childhood obesity has dramatic effects on adulthood health, even if you manage to lose the weight. I'm glad you lost some weight and are taking steps to maintain a healthy lifestyle. Thanks, it's been more effort to maintain over the past 10 years than it was losing the weight. About 95% of people who go on diets gain it all back or end up at a higher weight. The best way to avoid the trap is to avoid needing to lose weight at all, which comes back to parents helping their kids with healthy eating and exercise. My dad has a temper and yells angrily about everything. Not really at us, but if some little thing doesn't go perfectly the way he wanted, he will just start screaming about it. This has happened so often and still does, and it contributes largely to the severe anxiety disorder I have now. My dad would do this too. It would almost always cause me to start crying, and then he would start yelling at me for crying for no reason. It would get to the point where he would yell if he even thought I was starting to cry, even if I wasn't, and all that has left me with some bad anxiety too. My mum claims that he yells because he's partially deaf and doesn't know how loud he is, but I don't know if I believe that. I get this. I have sound-induced anxiety too because my mum's husband/sperm donor never spoke to me, only yelled at me. Even a car backfiring gives me a mini panic attack. I will mention that this seems to be one of the more common contributors to adult anxiety that has come up in this thread. Parents, save it for the occasions where it's really needed, if at all. My grandmother would never let me leave the house. Now I'm extremely antisocial. It's actually incredible with all the other stories I'm reading that are talking about parents who seem almost bat crap insane. I'm hearing people who are 14 that were trapped in their houses because their parents were control freaks. I mean, when I was in elementary, I got bullied for never being cool and never being seen outside. I lived in a pretty bad neighborhood, but it wasn't a problem. You guys need to throw your whole parents away. They denied ever sending me and my sister to a day camp at which I was harassed by an adult. Being told that my emotions were wrong/not right. For all the good grades I had, I'm emotionally immature. Yeah, I was straight out not allowed to be angry. It wasn't a written rule, but that's how it worked. No matter the problem at hand, or even if it was a completely reasonable thing to be upset about, putting on an angry face, raising my voice, or changing my voice tone would result in my mother getting very aggressive. And suddenly the actual problem was forgotten, and it was all about the attitude. The only way to actually solve some problems was to repress anger as much as possible. But then she wouldn't take the problems seriously because obviously I wasn't upset over them. But saying something like, "This makes me very angry," even with a fully calm voice, would just get her angry because nothing was ever a reason for me to be angry apparently. But not for her. She could show her anger as much as she wanted. Then she doesn't understand why I don't like to share my problems with her. I guess she's like that because Grandpa used to be one of those angry guys who started shouting very loud at the tiniest issue. I didn't get to know him, but everything she's told me about him went in the same direction. So I guess she's just scared of aggression, and that's why she reacts so strongly to it. Grandpa likely wasn't allowed emotions as a kid. It was also times of war, which likely messed with him too. Sometimes people can be hard to understand, but there's always a reason. Cleaning. My mother always freaked out and screamed anytime something looked messy. The whole cleaning process, picking up items, laundry, dusting, vacuuming, was always a huge ordeal and never good enough for her. I hate cleaning and I try really hard to keep my apartment neat, but I always associate cleaning with screaming. My husband is more messy than I am, and I sometimes can feel myself getting overly agitated with him, and I try so hard not to scream at him over a pile of laundry. I relate to this so darn much. My mother has insane and arbitrary standards for tidiness, and if I don't do something right or don't do it exactly right at the right time, it's yelling time. Getting teased about being a girl just trying to be friends with everyone, including boys. Every single one of them was, "my boyfriend," or "I must have a crush" or something. It can't just be me wanting to have friends. To this day, I really can't get close enough to guys to have a serious relationship. That, and I have a neglectful father, and every time I consider it, I'm petrified of bringing home an actual boyfriend to meet the family because I don't want to be teased anymore. It made me just feel so uncomfortable about who I can, should, or want to be friends with because I'm paranoid my family is mocking me behind my back. It didn't even need to be a friend. Just any story about anything that had occurred at school that happened to have a girl involved. "Oh, who is X? Is she your girlfriend?" Nowadays it's, "How come you never tell us anything about your personal life?" I grew up with Indian parents in America. "Who are those girls you're talking to? Why are you talking to them?" Every girl I talk to they look upon with suspicion to the point where they took me out of school and did homeschool to avoid friends? Seriously, my parents ruined my social skills forever. All I wanted my whole life was to fit in, to be a normal kid. Now they get angry that I don't share stuff with them. I always log out of my social media so they don't view it, and they complain that I'm neglecting my family because I hang out with my friends. I just know I'm going to raise my kids better, differently. I will never trust my parents. As someone whose parents quietly despaired of him ever bringing home any sort of partner until it actually happened, I guess I got the better end of that balance. When I was potty training, my potty was in the middle of the room. I have vague memories of my mum's friends watching me poop and laughing at my poop when I stood up. These memories are confirmed by my mum after I asked her. I'm 100% sure that's the reason I can't poop in public, or even at home if anyone can hear me. If you were anything like my nephew, you may have demanded an audience in the first place. He drags his potty out from the bathroom to the living room and wherever the most spectators are. I can't fault his confidence. "Gaze upon my works, ye mighty, and despair." My mum, jokingly, she says it was a joke nowadays, asked if I was pregnant every time my time of the month was late. I would spank my lower stomach for hours on end because I thought I was pregnant from sitting on the toilet. I was 12, and I didn't do the deed with anyone until I was 19. Anytime I would cry or express anger, I would be teased for being upset. "Aw, she's mad. Aw, wah. Oh, boo-hoo." I ended up shutting down and finding unhealthy ways to cope that eventually plagued my life in more ways than one. They always shrugged off my accomplishments of course you got straight A's, you're so smart, or "Congrats on this huge accomplishment, but I mean, we're not surprised." What they thought they were doing was complimenting me, and they were doing that. I never saw it was anything else until I grew up and realized I won't try at anything I'm not immediately good at and feel inferior to anyone who's better than me at something. While they were complimenting my intelligence, they should have been complimenting my work ethic. Now, I struggle with a fixed mindset and feel like a big bucket of wasted potential because I'm so terrified of failure. It's not their fault. They didn't do anything wrong, and we didn't know about the importance of grit and growth mindset back then. Ironically, a lot of smart kids get screwed over by a whole fixed mindset thing, even though they were complimented by it at the time. My parents do the same thing. Them giving me this expectation isn't helpful to my worrisome mind. I'm constantly expected to get better grades than my sister, even though she cheated on a lot of her work. I can account for my fear when my American history teacher told me that I got an 85% on my test. I ran to the bathroom and cried for about 30 minutes. Knowing my parents would be angry, I felt as if I was in a corner with nothing I could do. When she passed the grades out during class, the next day, I got a 95. I was really confused. I asked her about it, and she claimed she never said that I got an 85 on it. I looked through, and I really had a 95. I must have misheard or something, but it ended up seriously damaging my psyche. I seriously wish that I didn't have these expectations at all. I hope that nobody else ever has these, too. Watching my brother get praised for bringing it up to C's and rewarded with a dirt bike, while I sit waiting in the next chair to get reamed for slacking off and failing and then getting punished or grounded because there was one B on my report card. Then again, my dad's biggest parenting achievement was apparently, "At least I didn't get drunk and beat you all the time." Yay. Thanks, Yondu. I was raised in a church where virginity until marriage was sacred. I'd been a victim of the unspeakable act and repeatedly harassed as a child. The messages tumbling around in my mind growing up involved a lot of shame and being inherently unworthy of love. I'm finally in therapy for the abuse and more, and undoing the lies I learned so very well. Mum smoked 3 packs per day but didn't want us kids to be around the smoke all the time, so she set up her personal space, i.e. a chair where she reads books anytime she isn't working. Away from us, and we missed out on a whole lot of affection or interaction because of her habit. Took a lot of time and healing to have a healthy relationship with a woman. Happily married 8 years this coming October. Congrats on your marriage. Gosh, that's a mixed viewpoint. I mean, nice that she cared about caring for your health and well-being, but my God, interacting with your kids is so important. She could have taken down her per-day intake to exercise some care with her kids. My mum used to tell my sister and I that she was too claustrophobic to hug us. Didn't have that problem with our little siblings, though. I guess the claustrophobia cleared up. My mum used to tell me stories about a big hairy spider that was gonna come bite me if I got out of bed at night. I still frickin' hate spiders. My mother got tickets for a small boat and canal tour in Amsterdam for the 2 of us. Somehow, as a little kid, I wanted to keep those tickets, 'cause why not? So instead of just giving them, she wanted me to practice mental calculation for a bit. So she gave me a few questions on the lines of, a ticket for an adult costs this much, one for a child, this much, how much should a family pay with X adults and X children? I got 2 or 3 right, the last one on the other hand, I couldn't get it right. She even asked me 3 or 4 times more for the last one, each time more aggravated than the last time. Last answer yet again wrong, and she got kind of too frustrated with me, and she tore the tickets up and the whole boat trip was probably awkward for me. Now, 10 plus years later, I realize I have a fear of failure. I'm scared to screw up the things I do, say, think, and even how I look. Even now, typing this brings me a bit into tears. Worst fear of failure is that I'm very quickly to think that I'll disappoint my parents and my current boyfriend, making me say sorry way too often as well. Moving around. By the time I'd finished elementary school, I'd been to 5 cities and 2 states. I became very good at making friendships and getting into relationships, but I had a very hard time keeping them. My parents were and are helicopter parents. Along with this, they didn't care enough to teach me valuable lessons or anything I'd actually need in life. It was all grades, 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 Allah, Allah, Allah. The result? I lacked many of the social skills people had, such as basic cooking, social skills, etc., and also had and still have social anxiety, especially with authority, even if I don't see them as a threat, which one time ultimately nearly made me take my own life. My parents wanted me to be happy, which sounds fine out of context, but no. I wasn't allowed to be anything but happy. You can bet I would have gotten a lecture for anything less than cheerful. Comfort is antagonizing. Disappointment and annoyance feels shameful, and to this day I don't fully trust anyone at all with my thoughts or feelings. My dad would often playfully hit me in the head with plastic bottles, rolled up newspapers, etc. He usually hit harder than he probably meant to, and then when I'd say ow, he'd tell me to toughen up, that couldn't have hurt, blah blah. Now years later, I still find myself flinching at the most random of things. Oof. There's a saying, all kids deserve parents, but not all parents deserve kids. And I've been thinking it the entire way through recording this. My parents would scream and fight over a lot of stupid things and then blame it on me and not my siblings. When they did that, they brushed it off, didn't think anything was wrong when I cried about it, and yelled at me for being dramatic. I'm a triplet and the middle child, so I always had to do stuff my siblings didn't. When I was around 10, my brother and I had a big fight, and I was forced into anger management therapy. But my brother wasn't, so it really messed with my head. They also talk to the other two a lot, and when I try to say something, they unconsciously ignore me, because they think I'll say something hurtful or stupid. My mum used to make fun of me for fulfilling manly stereotypes, such as only wanting to wear one pair of shoes, hated makeup and clothes, shopping, even as a teen, not being able to find something despite it being right in front of me, etc. I'm really insecure about my femininity now. So much to where if I do something annoying that's stereotypically feminine and someone calls me out on it, I'm secretly super flattered that they think I'm girly. I'm also bisexual, so being a woman who likes women sometimes makes me feel really masculine and uncomfortable, even though I know it's irrational. Just laughing at me for getting upset about something stupid and telling me how silly I was being. There's nothing wrong with that, but I was just a sensitive kid and took away from that showing your sad and upset emotions was bad, and that it should be avoided in company of others at all costs. It really messed me up in the long term, and I didn't get help because I couldn't talk about it to my parents, for the same fear of being laughed at. I can't blame them, and I really don't, because it's really something I see quite a lot of, and with 99% of kids, it's harmless. I, however, am still recovering from years of mental crap. Neglect. Neglect seems harmless. People are busy with their own lives, right? But that lack of love does terrible things to a child. Severe depression, self-esteem issues, trust issues, loneliness becomes normal. Numbness becomes a habit. I wish I were dead, but the medicine helps, a bit. As a child, my parents would send me to bed without dinner if I misbehaved. I'd be so hungry in the middle of the night and I'd scramble up to the pantry and sneak whatever I could, mostly snacks for school lunches. I'd sneak back, squirrel it down, and throw the wrappers away carefully. I was also raised as the good one or the people pleaser. I've struggled with secret eating, binging, portion control, and anxiety for as long as I can remember. Eating never made sense. Couple this with the people-pleasing, and I'm just a chubby, conflicted mess with a high tolerance for all kinds of narcissistic people. I'm a parent now, and it's all clear as day. I'm working on myself, and hopefully I can be better to my kids. Helicopter parenting. I was never out of my mum's sight. I know she's an abuse survivor of a bad home, and I know she really did mean well, but now I'm suspicious of everything and afraid to try new things. Both my parents would sometimes leave randomly without telling me. My mum would leave whenever she was angry at my dad, and I was so young that I thought she would never come back. My dad didn't like to talk about it, and it would sometimes be for extended periods of time. My dad would disappear to the bar and not come home until 1 or 2ish in the morning, where I lived with him. About 13 years old at the time. Neither one sees how this could have negatively impacted me. I still get very scared of people leaving me. They sent me to speech therapy when I was 12. Until then, I had no idea that I had a bit of a speech impediment. And while I was a bit shy, I never felt bad about the way that I spoke. Speech therapy would have been great if I'd wanted to be there. Instead, I was suddenly made to feel like I was terrible at talking, and almost as bad, being forced to fix the way I talked with a bunch of 3 to 5-year-old kids. I had my own teacher, but I still had to wait with all the smaller kids. I was so angry that I actively tried not to do anything that the speech therapist wanted me to do. By my parents' thinking, sending me to speech therapy was probably an investment for my future. Talking is one of the pillars of society, but 15 years later, I still occasionally feel extremely self-conscious about the way my voice sounds, and I dread talking with people that I don't know. I would never tell them this, of course. Men. What's something that would surprise women about life as a man? I'm a guy with kids and a wife who is a nurse that works nights. It's almost impossible for me to go to do stuff with them without someone saying something about daddy duty or mom got a free day today, huh? It's ridiculous. Not every male with a child out there is some deadbeat parent who only hangs out with their kids when they absolutely have to. As a single dad, I can relate. People act like I'm on some extreme adventure of babysitting, when in reality, I'm taking my 2 kids with me grocery shopping. I'm a single dad 24/7, it's my life. No biggie. My ex and I separated 6 weeks ago. Yesterday, I took my 14-month-old daughter to a parent and toddler group, and a woman there asked me if I was babysitting. I was absolutely frickin' livid, but I couldn't and wouldn't let on how I felt. I had to settle for, no, are you? No idea whether she got the message or not, but the look of confusion on her face was nice to see. This sort of post has come up in the past, and overwhelmingly, men say they don't get sincerely complimented often enough, so when it happens, it sticks with them for a long time. I had such an opportunity at the grocery store a week or so ago. A man was walking toward me, and I noticed he had a nice beard, so I decided to tell him I liked his beard. He smiled and touched it and said thank you. I feel like it was a small but good deed, and I hope it sticks with him as the genuine compliment that it was. Bearded guy here. Whenever I got complimented about my beard, mostly by men, a little flower opens up in my heart. We definitely enjoy compliments. I just got out of a 4-year relationship, and during some reminiscing thoughts, I realized she never once told me I looked nice or called me handsome or anything. I told her she was beautiful every day for 4 years, and I don't even know if she found me attractive. I have high self-esteem, which is probably why I didn't notice it was going on until after we broke up. I learned a long time ago that no one is going to love me the way I love me. She was a good girl. I'm sure she didn't realize she was doing it. It sucks. I've been there. We're also the ones that are supposed to initiate doing the deed when we don't even know if our girl is attracted to us. I've never felt the same longing in my life that some of these gentlemen do, but it's definitely a valid one. Positive affirmation is never a bad thing, even if someone doesn't necessarily show how happy it makes them. Some of us are just bad at taking compliments, but they do appreciate them. The biggest turn-on for a guy is if she shows interest in you. That's seriously the number one thing on my list of things that makes women attractive to me. And that's a problem, because I often find myself in relationships that aren't healthy in the long term for me. But holy crap, when a girl shows interest, it's like all the other items on my list of things that are good for me when a partner is concerned go out the window. And I brush off and justify all the things I've literally internalized as bad for me. Like, for instance, a girl who isn't innately curious has no potential for me. And I know this, but if any girl shows interest, it's like, give it another chance. It'll work out this time. It's different because she likes you a lot. Scumbag brain and scumbag pee-pee collude on a lot of this stuff. It's stuff like this that gets me some of the most. Constantly being the one who had to take the risk, put their foot forward first, take charge first. It's exhausting. Like, sometimes, couldn't you just decide where to go? Couldn't you sometimes initiate intimate moments? Couldn't you sometimes message me first? I finally found the girl who I think I match with damn near perfectly, but the communication is such a huge issue. It's exhausting, and if we don't fix it, this will stagnate, and I'll never feel like it's right. But she is an attractive girl in a world where her social media posts gets all of the attention, and as far as I can tell, all of her conversations are initiated by her friends. I don't think she understands what it's like on this end. She has a huge network of people interested in her. I'm just an average Joe with a few good friends and some acquaintances I'm friends with. We pretty much go through life unnoticed, save for negative attention. I've been going to a pet supply store for about a decade, and although I'm always greeted nicely, I'm generally left alone. I walked in with a baby in a carrier one day, and I was greeted by everyone, and every single employee went out of their way to ask me what I was getting and if they could get it for me. I was fully capable of getting a 30-pound bag of dog food and the baby, but one employee simply wasn't having it. He ran back to grab the food and carried it to the checkout and then carried it to the car. I was shocked. I told my wife about it and she said, "They do that every time you go there, don't they?" Apparently, this is the customer service she receives every single time she goes there, or pretty much anywhere with decent customer service. She was shocked to hear that I didn't receive the same service. Me too. I love taking my 8-year-old daughter shopping because everyone is so nice and smiles at us. I'm a big scary guy, 6'4", 280 pounds, so no one smiles at me when I'm alone. 1. How much we would like to feel wanted and not simply useful or needed. 2. How much pressure there is on us in terms of body image. We hear about all the crap women go through, but do you ever stop to think about all the eggplant-sized jokes? That alone can cause insecurity, and that doesn't even touch things like losing your hair, graying, muscle mass, etc. That we really do care a lot more than society says we do. We're just not allowed to show it because that's a sign of weakness, and we're taught at a young age that you have to put up a perfect image or no one will ever want you. The first point hits home for me. Sometimes I confide in my wife that I don't feel wanted, and she gives me a crooked look. She goes on to explain all the reasons I'm useful and needed in the household, but never expresses how or why I'm wanted. I like kids. Kids are funny, they like breaking rules to have fun, and they still have an imagination. I don't screw kids. Hell, I hardly screw adults either, but that's beside the point. A girl I went on a date with last week showed me a picture of this adorable little boy, her neighbor's son, and told me she sometimes goes to her neighbor's house just to see him. When I told her that I didn't think that would ever be the case for me, she seemed sad and asked why. I'm a guy. Hello, Susan. It would make my night if I could take your goofy 6-year-old daughter out for ice cream. I've had a very depressing day.
You can F off before I call the police. How's that?
That works too. Have a nice night. See you never.
It's the same for me. I always tickle-thought my children, and we're totally goofy. I just love children. They're clever and funny, cute, and have awesome imaginations. But no matter how cute somebody else's child is, I would never want to be alone with them or get into a tickle fight. You know, I almost put touch them on the last sentence, but in my mind I thought, oh man, that would be bad. When in my brain I was thinking, picking up a 2-year-old and saying hi to them. Society is sick. I volunteer at an after-school program. Every so often one of the kids, maybe 12 to 15 years old, will see me on the bus, run over and talk to me. And I'll feel the eyes of every single woman on the bus, making sure everything is cool there. I've had more than one woman ask, "Is he bothering you, honey?" or switch seats so that they have a clearer view. I'm a clean-looking 34-year-old dude in a suit. That would never happen to a woman, and it's kinda sad. It's interesting, isn't it? Even as a guy who's worked with kids, I feel like I would make the same assumptions about seeing these guys do this, and I don't see how to change it on a societal level. Men have just as hard a time overcoming stereotypes as women. You, a woman, want to learn how to ride a motorcycle or want to be a programmer, and you don't want to be a housewife or spend all day cooking? Good for you! You, a man, don't want to cut the grass or learn to fix your car by yourself, and you want to spend all day cleaning the house and sewing pillowcases? Wake the F up and support your family. I get dirty looks anytime I mention that my wife does the mowing and most of the raking, like I've failed as a husband. If anything, I've won as a husband. I've got a wife that loves me enough to do the hard, annoying work because she knows my allergies will knock me on my butt. Same with cooking. Oh, giving the wife a night off, eh? Hell no. I cook every night. She knows I hate doing the dishes, so we made a deal. Man, this angry rant made me feel good about my wife. Haha. The book Lean In by Sheryl Sandberg actually described this pretty well. She said life as a man or woman is like running a marathon. With women, people from the sidelines are saying, "You can quit whenever you want, it'll be okay," which signified lower expectations professionally. Whereas men, people from the sidelines are saying, "You can do it, just finish," which signified people telling men to stay and keep going regardless, even if that's not ultimately what they wanted. It's hard not to want to disappoint or be judged by others. That metaphor really resonated with me, because the pressure is pretty real on both sides for these really real reasons. My ex fell into a trap of unrealistic expectations. She told me outright that she couldn't stand the fact that I didn't know what she was thinking without her telling me. Do I look like a freaking mind reader? I'm not completely awful at taking subtle hints, but I'm only human. If you tell me you need to go to a certain store to pick up a certain thing, and you say it in passing and never bring it up again, how can you possibly be mad at me a week later for not having taken you to said store? Take yourself to the store. Wait for Christmas and I'll buy you that coat, because I'm not that clueless and I will remember. Married almost 5 years. Made a separate Etsy/Amazon account for the husband. I go on there and make wish lists and never check the order history. Helped tremendously. One year I told him I need panties. I got 47 pairs for Christmas and nothing else. Dish towels for my birthday. Yeah. Wish lists save marriages. I remember my wife asked me years ago, "Hey, get any compliments on your bald head?" It was a drastic change, shaved head. She thought it fit my style. At the time, I only worked with guys. She looked amazed and shocked when I laughingly replied, "Are you serious?" I doubt anyone noticed. She thought I was heartbroken, but in reality, I would have been surprised if anyone did compliment. It's very rare to find a company or place of work that allows men to follow a seasonal dress code. It's really hot in the summer? Women can wear dresses or skirts, men are still wearing suits. It would be nice to be able to wear a nice pair of shorts if it's really hot out. The company where I used to work allowed men to take off their ties if it was over 90 degrees in the office. Can't get more accommodating than that. Haven't seen this one yet. My girlfriend was absolutely bamboozled by the fact that our family jewels can be raised or lowered by flexing. I mean, she was speechless for a good 3 minutes. Just to clarify, it's the cremaster muscle. Imagine you are trying to cut a pea short, now hold that flexed muscle. This works best when it's hot out and balls are hanging low. You will see the jewels move upward all the way to the base of your girthy manhood. Wait, what? Be right back. It's been 2 hours. For God's sake, man, are you all right? He may have overclenched. Get the tongs! From my experience, women talk about the act of doing the deed with their friends much more, and in much more graphic detail than men talk about the same subject with their guy friends. I guess my point is that men aren't as sleazy or gratuitous as most women make us out to be. Conversations with me and my dudes about doing the deed? Friend 1. So how did things work out with her? Me? Oh yeah. Grins slightly. Dude, nods in satisfaction. That's literally all there is to it. I mean, some men are still way too into trying to talk about the details of their encounters in the most graphic and disrespectful way possible, but my first man here is right in that they are in the minority. The complete and total lack of regard or value for our own lives, both internally and all too often externally. I don't mean to pick fights here, but when you hear about women and children first, men must register for the military draft, etc., it gets ingrained into you. You learn slowly but surely that your value is contingent upon what you do and not just who you are. You never feel truly satisfied just being there, just existing. You always feel like you have to constantly be working at something. And God forbid you ever become unemployed. Then you're essentially invisible. A homeless woman is often seen as more of a pity or someone to be sympathetic to. She must have been abused, had the unspeakable acts committed against her, etc. A homeless man? He's seen as a threat. He's seen as an outcast. There's little sympathy, even though, oftentimes, he may have gone through those exact same issues as the woman. It often feels like, on a certain level, society tends to see any problem that women have as being externally caused, whereas men's issues are often seen as his own failures or doings, etc. Men's problems are seen as being internally caused. Men are seen as having more control, which can be beneficial if you're wanting to be in a position of esteem and power, but it can also be harmful if you're struggling with mental illness or just to make ends meet. And that's why, I think, we so often refuse to seek help. We don't want to admit that a problem might be there, because we're afraid it'll turn into an indictment of ourselves, and no one will sit there and say, "It's not your fault, you're good enough, you're valuable just as a human being." Because I've never felt that a man's life is seen as unconditionally valuable. It's valued so often based mostly on what he does, or failing that, doesn't do. Women and children, by contrast, are valued just by being. It's a bitter pill to swallow once you grow up and become a man. You still remember being valued, but it's just not there anymore. You're supposed to have all this control, but you don't. Eventually, that pill all too often becomes literal. That's why we turn to green herb, doing the deed, video games, painkillers, adult flicks, the internet, social media, alcohol, smack, wherever we can escape to and pretend that we have control through or value in. We're taught from a young age that things don't happen to you, they happen because of you. You got a raise at work? Clearly you're a hard worker. Have a wife? Obviously you wooed her correctly. Got divorced? You messed up. She just fell out of love with you? You should have fought harder for her. You're depressed? You need to suck it up. It's so lonely. Hugely important issue. Everyone, and in my opinion, especially men, should read this recent article on loneliness from the New York Times. Now, I've noticed a couple of things that relate to this issue. First of all, I've observed men form deep friendships and relationships generally, through shared experience much more than talk. It simply doesn't feel like support if you're just talking to me about me unless we've seen some crap together, which is a key difference for women. I've observed women mostly feel the support of strangers, which does not happen for men. The void that is male loneliness can be filled by camaraderie of joint work on a project, of following a team, or scientific, political, business venture for us nerds, all together, and of discussions or arguments that may seem idiotic or too distant to be the true issue. At this point, I'm mostly just talking out of my butt, but I remember that convincing men to talk about personal issues is usually like convincing a wall to talk. Instead, take me out to a movie, to a diner for a milkshake and a silver cup. Go to the fricking gym, or to a cooking shop or craft class. Second, I want to talk about older men for a second with regards to loneliness. If the things I've said above apply to us 20-somethings, they apply tenfold to the generations before. Many older men have lost some or all of the friends that shared their experiences. To cancer, murder, time, etc., these friends are gone, and it is, or seems nearly impossible, to form a comparable replacement. So older men don't even try. They may form surface friendships at the bar, but as I said, that's hardly going to scratch the itch of loneliness. It might keep them going, but so many older men just look and act like husks of their former selves because they no longer have friends. This issue is huge. Interesting thoughts. Here in Australia, we have this phenomenon called a man shed to help older men deal with loneliness. It's usually run by a local community and provides usually older men with a place to work on projects in a social setting. It's been quite effective in preventing and treating depression, from what I understand. Also, picking up hobbies like amateur astronomy, etc. can be a conduit to forming more meaningful friendships. A lot of my guy friends are simultaneously very lonely and seem very intimidated by the prospect of even trying new things. Initiatives like the Shed idea are great, as are trying out adult classes for something you've been curious about for a long time. I think most women would be surprised to learn that our pee doesn't always come out in a nice, steady, straight stream. My wife still assumes I have no aim because of the times where it may be coming out in more of a splash manner, or the stream is just completely directed haywire. Does anybody else get splash on their shins? It's really gross when I'm wearing shorts. Gross when you feel it on your shins, but for me it's worse realizing after it also happens when you wear jeans, but you just don't feel it. You have to be scared of kids. For example, one time I was in the supermarket and a little kid came up and told me he was lost. But because people jump to call men kiddie diddlers here in the US, instead of walking the kid to the front or trying to help him find his mum and dad, I had to tell him to stand there and not move, and I went to the front and got an employee. Now here's the craziest thing. The first employee I found was a male, and his response was, "Hang on, it's store policy that male employees don't handle these situations." So he had to go and get a female employee who then helped the kid out. I asked the guy after why that was the policy, even though I kind of knew the answer, and he explained to me that it's happened just before in this store alone, where a male employee had gone to comfort a crying kid or help them find their parents, and either the parents or a stranger had accused them of trying to kidnap them. So if you haven't thought about this before, there you go. Now if you see a guy walking past a kid who's lost, you know why they might have just walked past them. It's not a lack of wanting to help, it's the intense fear of being falsely labeled something. Well, here's a few. Number 1, how much crap we give each other as banter from a young age. Borderline bullying at times, but it's definitely helped us to man up. Number 2, not every guy is a handyman. Number 3, body issues affect us greatly. It's overlooked as we don't often share it, as we generally don't have the same level of emotional support that women provide each other. 4, most common advice we have is to just deal with it. How awkward it is to cry or be emotional in front of other people, even in situations where it would be normal, such as funerals. Usually bottle that stuff up and save it for when you're alone, and then let it out so no one sees. When my dog died, I went with my family and girlfriend at the time. I was 20. After they put him down, I went out of the room and cried in my girlfriend's arms. I apologized heavily for it over and over. Even when talking about it with a friend later, I tried to downplay the crying and he told me, "What do you expect? For me to tell you to F you for crying, you sissy B-word? Your goddamn dog died. Of course you cried." Probably the first intimate initial moment I had with my now husband was when we first started dating. His grandfather died. Husband's ex-girlfriend showed up to his grandpa's funeral, and they ended up doing the deed. He was so messed up over it. I called him later to ask how he was doing, and he told me all of it and lost it crying. I drove over and comforted him, but the fact that he trusted me enough to tell me what happened and to cry in front of me really stuck with me. He kept apologizing. I'm not sure if it was over doing the deed with his ex or crying, but I was like, holy crap, you have nothing to apologize about. We hadn't decided to be exclusive at that point, and told him I still cry about my mom from time to time, and that's okay. It's so incredibly messed up the way society expects men to downplay or deny their own grief or sadness. Tears are a testament to the depth of a relationship or connection. It's total bullcrap that they're not okay to shed. How much stress a man can undergo without a mental breakdown. My wife stays at home with the kids and I work 65 hours a week so we can live in the suburbs. She has no idea how hard it can be to say no to her or the kids because money is tight. It breaks my heart sometimes to not be able to give them everything they desire. My wife could never understand how tough that can be on me. Feeling like I'm not doing enough or not man enough to provide. Tough crap. Life as a dad and a man. Sole breadwinner. It can be tough mentally and physically. My wife works hard. She takes care of our kids and our house. She also pays the bills. But I'm so tired. Always. What's the best question someone asked in life skills class? During student teaching, I heard a question a kid had asked. The kid raised his hand and asked, "So, if the mom were to have chest cancer, would her milk still be safe for the baby to drink?" The teacher thought it was a very out-of-the-box question, but unique, and praised the kid for thinking of it. I think they said their response was something along the lines of, "The mom probably wouldn't be in any shape to breastfeed." So the kid says, "Oh, okay, so could the baby still drink milk out of the dad's pee-pee?" The teacher had to turn around to avoid losing it in front of the kid. If you, came on a table, would it move?" He was trying to ask if the sperm moved around in the seminal fluid, but had some poor choice of words. Wait, that's not how you check for mimics? "If I keep letting him pee on me, will I get pregnant?" Best day of my entire schooling career ever. When I was in 6th grade, we had something called FLE, I think it stood for Family Life Education or something, that was pretty much just a life skills class. It wasn't co-ed, so all of us, 11 and 12-year-old guys, were being taught by a homeroom teacher and the computer teacher. They gave us index cards to write questions down, and someone asked, "How do whales do the deed?" The teachers thought it was funny, but they didn't answer, and after a few minutes, I guess someone asked again because comp teacher asks, "Okay, what's up with you guys and whales?" I mean, now I kinda want to know what's up with whales. In a certain species of whale, a friend prevents them from sinking by letting them do the deed on his back. Our viewers should have now realized that when I'm saying life skills, the word I'm swapping out is SEX education, so the video doesn't get demonetized. There are, however, a lot of other words that I'm swapping out as well, obviously. I went to a private religious university that did a yearly life skills talk where the folks could submit questions about a week beforehand, and then have them answered anonymously at the talk. Best one was when the doctor leading the talk, scrolling through his list of questions, reads, "What is pubic hair for?" pauses for a sec and says, "I have no idea," and just keeps scrolling on to the next one. Made me chuckle anyway. I did ask that question in life skills once, and I was laughed at by the class, and the teacher also did a, "I don't know," and moved on. I too have been waiting for an answer for over 20 years. I always assumed it was a protective cushion, just like the hair on your head. Hair on the head protects a little bit from bonks and falls. The hair on your bits protects them when you're smashing them together. So the teacher told us wearing 2 rubbers is actually less effective because of the increased friction, and a top mind in my class asked, "If you go fast enough, could you start a fire?" Asking the really important questions. A kid in 5th grade asked what the flavors on rubbers are for, while trying to stifle his laughter. The teacher responded with, "Use your best judgment." Can you get an STD if a guy splooges in your ear? Cue the rest of the class slowly turning their heads to look at this girl. You can develop hearing aids. Ha 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 ha. When a teacher was explaining that you could in fact get STDs from oral fun times, a girl in my grade asked, "How can you catch an STD over the phone?" Solid question, I thought. Fun fact, telephone area codes in the UK use STD, subscriber trunk dialing, for long-distance calls, so in the 1960s and 70s it was new and exciting to have a phone with STD. The teacher told us the average size of male anatomy. Girl beside me whips out a ruler, marks it, and proclaims, "That's tiny!" She then proceeded to ask if the balls slide in too, followed by a hand motion and a sound. Had us all in stitches. There was a girl I was friends with in high school that was pretty fun, but known as a more, well, intimate person. She was dating a 26-year-old when she was like 16, stuff like that. When I took life skills class with her, the best gem of a conversation with our teacher went something like this. She said, "You know how when guys climax before the splooge comes out? There's a pre-splooge. Teacher, yes, why? Can this pre-splooge get someone pregnant?" "Yes, there can still be sperm cells present." "Well, that sure sucks. Can I please be excused?" She texted me later and told me she wasn't pregnant, thank God, but the timing of it was like a sitcom. Does peanut butter make your chest grow bigger? This was asked by one of the most popular girls in the 5th grade. I mean, if you eat lots and it makes you fat, you get a bigger chest, right? We had an anonymous question box where students could ask questions they were too embarrassed to raise their hands and ask. A lot of times people would just write joke questions, but the teacher would read them anyway. One day the teacher reads the question, "Is it better to pleasure yourself with your left or your right pee-pee?" A kid in the back audibly says, "You're supposed to have 2?" and immediately starts crying. I'm a little concerned because these sorts of classes usually take place in their teens. If that kid was that unsure of such an extreme fact of human anatomy, I'm worried. Here's one more chat from the anonymous questions box. If semen comes out at 30 miles per hour, how fast does a baby come out? Dear God, the anonymous question box was great in my high school. My second child came out close to that speed. Doctor almost didn't catch her. We had a box where people could write a question they were too embarrassed to ask, and someone would read them aloud for the teacher to answer. The best one was, "If I'm doing a girl in the butt and she farts, will my balls explode?" And the answer was... After she finally got the room of 15-year-olds to stop laughing, she informed us that no, it will cause him no harm. One of the 5th graders asked, "Does adult fun times feel good?" Poor teacher had no idea how to answer that. My dad asked that to his parents after they gave him and his brother a book about doing the deed. Apparently, my grandfather had to explain straight-faced that if it wasn't good, then no one would be doing it. A story from my friend's 5th grade life skills class, someone asked the male teacher what the climax felt like, and after consideration he said, "Like a sneeze, but good." I've always felt like that was a solid description. What's going to happen with all of these cucumbers after class? Girl drawing male anatomy on the whiteboard and then asks herself quietly, but loud enough for people to hear, "Are the balls in front of the pee-pee or behind?" I remember when the abstinence-only crew came to our class and presented their spiel about how life is so much better if you wait until marriage, and all that, then presented an opportunity to ask a question anonymously by dropping your question in a box. One kid asked how deep the butthole goes. Some kid asked what doing it in the ear was. The teacher squinted at him and went, "What?" Depending on when this was, the kid probably saw the Family Guy episode about that and assumed it was the real thing. Our teacher was telling us the different methods of pregnancy and STD prevention, and he said that the only way to 100% prevent both is abstinence. A guy said, "Where can you buy an abstinence?" Kid, why do people bounce up and down when they do the deed? Teacher, very casually, "I don't know, I guess they just think it feels better that way." Well, frick, that's one professional teacher. There's no way I would have been able to keep a straight face. Just imagine, a man with his eggplant and some lady and they're just not moving, just lying on top of each other, keeping silent, and awkward eye contact the entire time. In middle school life class, our educator was about to go on her spiel about abstinence. A golden exchange went down a little something like this. "We're going to talk about a certain concept today. It starts with the letter A. Who knows what we might be talking about?" A 12-year-old girl shouts across the room a word that begins with A and means doing it in the butt. My teacher asked my class on a similar note, "What's the one sure way to avoid HIV?" Guy in my class stands up and announces with his hands on his hips, "Only do it in the butt. If only." Sincerely from the gay community. I can't believe that in not one, but 2 abstinence classes, kids were throwing them off by asking questions about doing it in the butt. Well done, kids. My friend, can we cook human egg into an omelette? Good days. My 9th grade life class teacher liked to pick on the students a little bit for fun, and he asked one of the boys, "What would you do if you walked into a room and there was an undressed woman on your bed?" The kid immediately said, "Is it my mom?" I've spent many years teaching life class. In that time, many obscure questions have been asked, and I've prided on keeping a straight face and answering professionally. Apart from once. A class of 30 13-year-old boys and girls. The boy at the far end of my classroom, "Sir, what happens if we pee in her when we're doing the deed?" Quick as you like, a girl quipped up, "She'll dump you daft F-word." I did that once and she said it turned her on. You have an odd taste in women. I came here to write, "Is it possible to pee in a girl during fun times?" This must be a more common question than I thought. Our 5th grade, 10-year-olds or so, life class, we had to turn in any questions on anonymous note cards. One person just wrote, "Why do people do the deed?" They had a good point. The video we watched didn't say anything about it being enjoyable or rewarding at all, just the mechanics of it. For kids who hadn't developed the urges yet, it was weird as F to think about. Can you break a hard pee-pee? Can I get pregnant from a dog? Popular blonde girl, 9th grade. Oh no. I think you mean ruh-roh. With a diagram of female anatomy projected on the wall, a kid raised his hand and said, "I have a question." Everyone stopped and looked at him. The teacher said, "All right, go ahead." "So that's where I put it in, right?" The teacher says, Well, if you're talking about the act of doing the deed, then yes." The kid spoke loud enough for the room to hear him as he made a little note, "Put pee-pee in hoo-ha." Then said, "Okay, can we go now?" Our teacher told the class that since we wouldn't ask a single question at the end of the 3-day class, we each had to write a question on a piece of paper, fold it up, and give it to him. He only chose a few pieces of paper to read from, and mine was the first. "Can you have 3 biological parents?" Me and a few of my buddies have been debating this for a while, and I wanted to prove to them that it wasn't possible. So he read it and got pretty annoyed and said, "No, it's not possible. Y'all are some messed up kids." Everyone was laughing, which made him even angrier. He angrily read the rest of the notes and then had the principal come in to talk to the class for quite a while. I asked at a Jewish day school, if it's Passover and a girl has a yeast infection, is it unkosher to eat her out? If you wear Coca-Cola flavored protection, do you have Coca-Cola flavored babies? Happened in 5th grade. Not really a question, but still funny as heck. Kid 1. What happens if the protection breaks? Teacher. Then your partner will become pregnant. Kid 2. Oh, crap. Teacher. Are you trying to tell me that you're active in that way? Kid. Not since I lost your mom's phone number. That kid was suspended for a week. Wasn't from a student, but the teacher said one of the silliest things I'd ever heard. He said he classifies oral fun times as the same as regular doing the deed, because the splooge can drip down into her hoo-ha from her mouth and impregnate her. I was stunned. Dear listeners, that was one hell of a statement to convert to a YouTube-friendly safe-for-work format, and to know that a teacher said that in its uncensored format to children. My goodness gracious. What happens when you pull your foreskin back too far? Lots of pain and blood, along with a quick trip to the hospital is what happens. It's not fun. Can you get pregnant from doing it in the butt? Teacher, see me after class? My favorite reply to a question was a 5th grade girl. When I wipe, I can see I have some hair down there. How do I get rid of it? Of course, my response is along the lines of, it's natural, you don't need to get rid of it, it protects your body. To which a sassy little thing replied to her with a wave of her hand, Girl, my mum gets a Brazilian, I'm just gonna do that. I had a hard time keeping a straight face. There was a kid in my grade who always asked some fairly strange questions during life class. Highlights included when he asked if a bug could crawl into a hoo-ha and if he could get it off with a glass of water as an adult fun time aid. 7th grade biology, not life class, we were talking about the two-headed girls. My friend asked which one felt the climax when they did the deed and what the other head is supposed to do when they're doing it. Do they look away or is it basically a threesome? I nearly busted one myself from laughing so hard. Life class in an all-boys school. The lecturer mentioned that HIV can be transmitted orally and by doing it in the butt due to bodily fluid transfer during said events, but then said that the HIV virus cannot survive long exposures to air. I put 2 and 2 together and asked, so is doing the deed airtight, while miming the penetration act with my fingers. I got detention for a week. If 2 bearded men kiss, will they get crabs? Watts Middle High School, Centerville, Ohio, circa 1981. Credit the anonymous question submission box and a teacher willing to read out loud whatever questions came out of the box. Ah well, screw it, I've got a story for this. We had a gay dude with HIV come to my summer camp to do a life class talk. He asked if we had any questions, saying, literally any question. Someone took it literally and asked, what's the biggest PP you've ever had? Without missing a beat, the instructor said, bigger than yours. If you're doing it really hard, can your PP break off? Still cheers me up. Showing my age here, I was in high school when Jersey Shore was in its heyday. There's an episode where Snooki refuses to go into the ocean because it's full of frickin' whale sperm. So a girl in my class asked our health teacher if the ocean was in fact full of whale semen. My name is Ed. A girl asked me, so what day do we start life class? I took advantage of the situation and started rubbing my hands together and saying, ah yes, whenever you like. An awkward silence followed, then one kid says, oh, and starts busting up laughing. Then a whole cascade of laughs happen as people start to get it, and then the crowd that needed an explanation. A later addition to this story. Isn't it obvious enough that this happened in 7th grade when I was 12 years old? My goodness, I condemn those horrible kind of creeps, and I'm also an IT consultant that happily performed my duty to report on an executive who had kiddie content on his computer. Also, I admit, I thought of it at the beginning of the semester and I was dying for the right moment to say it. Thank you for clearing that up, Ed. I must admit I automatically assumed you were a teacher and I was getting very, very concerned. Not quite life class, but my high school brought in a guy that specialized in STDs to teach us about them, how to recognize when we or our partner is infected, and how to protect against them in general. Had an anonymous Q&A section where people wrote down their questions on paper and put it in a box, then he randomly drew and discussed. Most of the questions were either decent ones or your basic wee-wee jokes. Then he pulled one out and read, "Is it safe to do the deed on my dog?" And everyone just burst out laughing. After a moment or two of the teachers getting everyone calmed down, he started talking. We all expected him to launch into how this is disgusting and unsafe, etc. We completely lost our crap when he went on to not only say that it was perfectly safe, apparently the only known STD transmissible between humans and canines results in a flu-like infection for a few weeks, and that's it. But he actually went on to say that since humans and dogs cannot get pregnant from each other, he actually recommends this. The horror on our teachers' faces was absolutely priceless. It's truly a shame that this happened in the days before smartphones were really a thing. That crap was front-page grade madness. If a guy puts a pee-pee in a butt, can it get turned inside out? A guy in our 5th grade life class asked me if he could fit his entire head inside a hoo-ha, and then proceeded to sing A Whole New World. Dude was 10. Someone asked if you could use Saran Wrap, the crinkly plastic candy wrappers for stuff like Jolly Ranchers, as a makeshift rubber. The entire class couldn't help laughing, and we got in trouble because we all had to agree to be mature. You can't make freshmen act mature. Can you still get pregnant if the pee-pee is too small and can't reach the cervix? Professor Speaker Person looked high as F trying to comprehend that one. How is Babby formed? 38 plus 2 weeks pregnant? Can oo get pregante? Is semen flammable? What color is a zebra's pee-pee? Wait, I can contribute here. Guy in the 7th grade loudly decried wearing a rubber and said he had a better method. He'd put lemon juice on his pee-pee just before doing the deed, and even though it was terrible stinging for both of them, it killed the sperm and meant he could go in raw, worry-free. The next year he dropped to take care of his newborn child. Is D-word for a female common adult fun times toy a country? The girl was an idiot, and the funniest part was, she asked the head of the geography department. There is a city in Newfoundland with that name, from the last I remember. You can Google it. Number 1. Do people really say giggity giggity while doing the deed? 2. It's been said women have 3 holes. Please explain. 3. How does the woman poop out the baby? 8th grade life skills class. Can you use duct tape instead of a rubber? Anonymous note in the question box. Had a guy ask this anonymously via card in a hat during one of those life class things during freshman year of college. The card read, PP plus PP, ? First question. Professor was tenured and didn't give an F, so she looks at the group and says, I can only interpret this as asking if you have one. It will be located between your legs and will be slightly smaller than your pinky. Would have to say the best question I heard was from my 15-year-old sister and her best friend in health class this past year. Had the box with written anonymous question. First question was theirs. What do you do when guys don't understand no? My sister said teacher just stood there like, I don't know how to respond to that. The proper answer is pepper spray. 8th grade health class had a pretty chill teacher. After spring break, we begin the life class health unit. Teacher starts the class off. What do people typically find attractive in others? Obviously, he was expecting a few answers. Some may be a little edgier than others. Before anyone else could answer, a kid just blurts out, feet. This wasn't a question, but something I said in life skills class when I was like 13 or so, and for a while I found it embarrassing, but now I just find it funny. We were discussing the fact that when a woman is pregnant, her time of the month stops. So I, ever the class clown, said, so the baby's kind of like a tampon, right? It just sucks up all the blood like a very tiny vampire. The entire class and the teacher, actually, screw her, she was my science teacher for 2 years, and she was a butthole, looked at me like I'd absolutely lost my mind. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. Put the playlist on in the background to finish listening to all the stories, linked at the top of the description. And if you like Am I the Genius, give Am I the Jerk a shot, linked in the description too. Either way, thanks a lot for watching, and we'll see you guys next time.